In the 41st millennium, there are no true vampires. There are hornate berserkers who drink blood in frenzy. There are night lords who flay skin and terrify worlds. There are even the cursed sons of Sanguinius, noble warriors damned by genetics to crave the vital essence of their enemies. But true vampires, immortal predators who existed before humanity conquered the stars. Those are myths from ancient Terra. Stories told in the dark corners of hive cities to frighten children. The Blood Angels knew this. They had studied every fragment of old lore, desperately searching for answers to their own curse. They found nothing. No vampire legends could explain why the sons of the great angel fell into murderous rage, why they saw visions of their primarch's death, why some craved blood with an intensity that shamed their noble heritage. So when reality tore open above their strike cruiser blade of Sanguinius, when the warp vomited something ancient and wrong into their sacred halls, when that something landed in a crouch on the deck plating with red eyes blazing and a smile that promised violence, the Blood Angels did what they always did. They prepared for war. The arrival brother Sergeant Erasmus was performing his devotions in the starboard observation bay when the ship's alarms shrieked. The Geller fields fluctuated. Reality rippled like water, and through the shimmer of collapsing dimensional barriers, something fell. It hit the deck hard enough to crack ceramite plating. The figure rose slowly, unhurried, as if materializing inside a space marine vessel was merely an inconvenience. Erasmus's enhanced vision cataloged the threat. Humanoid, tall but not post-human tall, dressed in archaic red coat and wide-brimmed hat that belonged in a Terran museum, pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that burned like fresh spilled blood. The creature looked around the observation bay with evident curiosity, taking in the Gothic architecture, the bronze aquilus, the stained glass depicting Sanguinius's final battle against the arch-traitor. When those crimson eyes fixed on Erasmus, the Space Marine felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of service. Hunger. Not his hunger. The thing's hunger, radiating outward like heat from a forge. Erasmus raised his bolt pistol. "Identify yourself, creature. By whose authority do you manifest aboard a vessel of the Adeptus Astartes?" The figure's smile widened, revealing elongated canines that needed no explanation. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of centuries, amused, theatrical, and utterly without fear. "Authority? I don't recall asking permission." The creature adjusted its hat with one gloved hand. "Though I must say the decor is impressively brutal. Tell me, do all ships in this era look like cathedrals fucked a weapons factory, or is this just your particular aesthetic choice?" Erasmus fired. The mass-reactive bolt struck the creature's center mass, penetrating the red coat, detonating with a wet crunch of displaced flesh. The figure staggered backward, looked down at the fist-sized hole in its torso, and laughed. "Oh, I like this place already." The wound closed. Flesh knitted together with supernatural speed, the red coat repairing itself as if time had reversed. Within 3 seconds, there was no evidence of damage except the splash of black blood on the deck. Blood that moved, that writhed like it was alive before evaporating into crimson mist. Erasmus triggered the Vox link. "Brother Sergeant Erasmus to command. Xenos contact in Observation Bay Theta 7. Entity displays regenerative capabilities and hostility, requesting..." The creature moved. One moment it stood 20 meters away. The next, it was there. One pale hand wrapped around the barrel of Erasmus's bolt pistol, redirecting it toward the floor with casual strength that should have been impossible. The Space Marine's enhanced reflexes kicked in. He released the pistol, drew his combat knife, and thrust for the creature's throat. The blade passed through empty air. The creature had phased backward, becoming translucent, insubstantial. It reformed 3 meters away, examining Erasmus with the detached interest of a predator studying interesting prey. "Fast," the creature said approvingly. Stronger than human, certainly. The scent coming off you is unusual, enhanced, modified. Those red eyes narrowed. Are you even human anymore? The observation bay doors slammed open. 5 more blood angels poured through, bolters raised, led by Brother Chaplain Thaddeus in his skull helm and crimson armor. The chaplain's Crozius Arcanum crackled with power as he assessed the situation. Brother Sergeant Erasmus in combat stance, unknown entity standing calmly amid destroyed deck plating and the lingering taste of wrongness in the air. "In the name of the Emperor and the blood of Sanguinius," Thaddeus intoned, his voice amplified by his armor's voxcasters, "you will submit to restraint or be destroyed." The creature looked at the 6 space marines surrounding it. Then it laughed, a rich, genuine sound of pure delight. Destroyed? By all means, try. It spread its arms wide, coat billowing despite the still air. "I've been waiting centuries for someone who might actually succeed. Show me what you can do, angels." Thaddeus signaled the attack. 6 bolters opened fire simultaneously. The observation bay filled with thunder and flame. If you crave stories of ancient monsters meeting the 41st Millennium's darkest warriors, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the bloody collision of myths made flesh. The creature stood in the center of the firestorm, body jerking and twitching as mass reactive rounds tore through flesh and bone. Its left arm separated at the shoulder, its right leg shattered at the knee. Half its skull exploded in a spray of black ichor. The red coat shredded into ribbons. The Blood Angels maintained fire discipline, each brother placing shots with centuries of combat experience. They had fought demons, Xenos horrors, and traitor marines. They knew how to kill the unkillable, overwhelming firepower, sanctified ammunition, and the righteous fury of the Emperor's chosen. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus raised his hand. The firing ceased. Where the creature had stood, only a barely recognizable mass of shattered flesh remained, held together by strips of red fabric. Black blood pooled across the deck, steaming in the recycled air. "Secure the remains," Thaddeus ordered. "I want." The blood moved. It flowed backward, defying gravity, climbing up the mass of torn flesh like roots seeking soil. The shattered bones clicked as they realigned. Muscle tissue wove itself together with horrifying precision. The creature's torso inflated like a balloon filling with air, ribs snapping back into place with audible cracks. Within 30 seconds, it stood whole once more. The red coat was pristine. The hat sat at a jaunty angle. Those crimson eyes blazed with something between ecstasy and disappointment. "Better," the creature said, rolling its shoulders experimentally. "Genuinely better. Those weapons have some punch." It picked up a spent bolt casing from the deck, examining it with interest. Self-propelled explosive rounds. Clever, brutal, but clever. Then it looked directly at Thaddeus, and its expression shifted, smile fading, replaced by something more serious. More dangerous. "But if that's your best effort, angels, then we're going to have a problem. Because I didn't ask to be here, I don't appreciate being shot without so much as an introduction, and I'm starting to think you lack the basic courtesy that separates soldiers from savages." The creature stepped forward. 6 bolters tracked its movement. "So, let's try this again. My name is Alucard. I serve the Hellsing organization, sworn to defend Britain from supernatural threats. I was engaged in combat when something, your warp, I'm beginning to suspect, dragged me into this reality." It gestured around the observation bay. "Now I'm on your ship, in your universe, and frankly, I'm curious whether you're going to be interesting or just another group of zealots who shoot first and think never." It stopped 3 meters from Thaddeus, close enough that the chaplain's Crozius could reach it in a single swing. So, Chaplain, yes, I can read enough of your mind to know your title. Are we going to kill each other, or are we going to talk like civilized monsters? Brother Chaplain Thaddeus had served the Blood Angels for 173 years. He had witnessed the Black Rage claim brothers he loved like sons. He had stood vigil over Death Company warriors as they screamed their primarch's final moments. He had fought demons that whispered his darkest fears, Xenos that defied the natural order, and heretics who spat upon everything sacred. None of them had called him a monster to his face. "You dare," Thaddeus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that rumbled through his armor's vox speakers, "to name the Emperor's chosen as monsters? We who stand between humanity and the darkness? We who bear the curse of our gene sire with honor?" Alucard tilted his head, studying the chaplain with those unsettling crimson eyes. "I dare a great many things, Chaplain. But I'm not insulting you. I'm acknowledging reality." He gestured at himself, then at the assembled Space Marines. "Look at us. You've modified yourselves beyond baseline humanity. Extra organs, enhanced strength, extended lifespans. You drink blood when the curse takes you, don't you? I can smell it on you. Underneath all that ceramite and incense. The thirst." Brother Sergeant Erasmus moved to flank the creature, bolt pistol recovered and aimed. "You know nothing of our burden, Xenos?" "Xenos?" Alucard laughed. "I'm human. Or I was once a very long time ago, though I suppose was is doing heavy lifting in that sentence." He looked down at his gloved hands. "I'm a vampire, Sergeant. A real one. Not whatever pale imitations you've encountered in this millennium. And from where I'm standing, you and I have more in common than you'd like to admit." The temperature in the observation bay seemed to drop. The Blood Angels felt it, that primal recognition, predator acknowledging predator. Thaddeus's enhanced senses cataloged the wrongness of this creature, the way shadows clung to it like living things, the absence of a detectable heartbeat, the sheer weight of its presence despite its humanoid frame. "We are nothing like you," Thaddeus said. "We are the Emperor's angels, created by the hand of the primarch Sanguinius himself. Our modifications serve holy purpose. Our curse is a trial to be endured with dignity. You," he raised his Crozius Arcanum, the power field crackling with barely restrained energy. "You are an abomination that embraces monstrosity." Alucard's smile returned, sharp and knowing. "And that's the difference between us, isn't it? I accepted what I am centuries ago. You're still pretending you're something else." The Crozius swung. Thaddeus was fast, post-human reflexes guided by decades of combat training, blessed by the finest war gear the Imperium could forge. The power weapon moved in a blur, striking where Alucard's head had been a microsecond before. Alucard wasn't there. He had moved backward, that same impossible phasing the Blood Angels had witnessed before. But this time, as he became translucent, something else became visible. Shapes within his body, silhouettes of other forms writhing beneath his skin. Faces pressed outward, mouths open in silent screams. Brother Erasmus felt his gorge rise. "By the throne. What are those?" "Souls," Alucard said simply, resolidifying 5 meters away. "Everyone I've killed and consumed over the last 500 years. 3,424,867 to be precise. They're my ammunition, my armor, my immortality." He pulled off one glove, revealing pale skin that seemed to shimmer with internal movement. "Each one a life I've taken. Each one a death I've denied." The observation bay fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines and the crackle of Thaddeus's power weapon. The Blood Angels processed this information through their enhanced cognition, running threat assessment protocols, comparing the entity before them to every enemy in the Imperium's vast databases. Nothing matched. "Heresy," one of the brothers whispered. "That's soul-binding. Warpcraft. It has to be..." I don't know what your warp is, Alucard interrupted, but my abilities have nothing to do with it. This is older, simpler. I drink blood. I consume the life essence of my victims, and their souls sustain my immortality. No demons, no dark gods, just a vampire doing what vampires do. Thaddeus lowered his Croceus slightly, but didn't deactivate it. His tactical mind was working now, overriding his initial fury. This creature had withstood concentrated bolter fire and regenerated from catastrophic damage. Killing it, truly killing it, would require more than conventional weapons. And if it was telling the truth about those souls... You said you serve, Thaddeus said carefully. The Hellsing organization. What manner of authority commands a creature like you? Alucard's expression shifted, some of the theatrical menace fading into something almost respectful. A woman named Integra Hellsing, my master. She wields the authority of the British Crown and the Protestant Church to defend Britain from supernatural threats. Vampires, mostly, ghouls, the occasional Nazi vampire army. Nazi vampire army? Brother Erasmus repeated, convinced he had misheard. Long story, different universe. Alucard waved dismissively. The point is, I serve because I choose to. Because she earned my loyalty by being stronger than me in the ways that matter. She gives orders, I follow them, and in exchange I get to fight interesting opponents and occasionally remind the world what a real monster looks like. Thaddeus felt something shift in his assessment. This creature wasn't a mindless beast or a demon of the warp. It had structure, loyalty, a code, however twisted. It was a weapon, but one that answered to authority. Your master is not here, Thaddeus said. No, Alucard agreed. She's in another reality entirely, assuming she still exists at all. I was in London, fighting a group of Vatican assassins, don't ask, when something grabbed me. Reality tore. I fell through. He gestured vaguely at the walls. Whatever that space between spaces is, the screaming void full of colors that shouldn't exist. And then I was here, on your ship. The warp, Thaddeus said. The immaterium, the realm of souls and demons, where reality breaks down and nightmares take form. You fell through a warp rift. Alucard's eyes narrowed. That would explain the headache. And the... He paused, tilting his head as if listening to something the Blood Angels couldn't hear. The noise. There's something out there, something massive and bright, like a psychic lighthouse, except it's screaming the same note endlessly. The Astronomicon, Brother Erasmus said, surprised. You can sense the Emperor's light? Only psychers and navigators. I'm telepathic, Alucard said, among other things. And right now that beacon feels like someone's shining a spotlight directly into my brain. Uncomfortable, but manageable. He looked at Thaddeus. Your Emperor, the one whose aquillas are plastered over every surface. He's real? He's the source of that light? The Emperor protects, Thaddeus said automatically. He sits upon the golden throne on Holy Terra, guiding humanity through the darkness. He is our Lord and Master, the father of the primarchs, the architect of our Imperium. And you worship him. He is worthy of worship. Alucard was quiet for a moment, those red eyes studying Thaddeus with uncomfortable intensity. You actually believe that, all of you. It's not just doctrine or propaganda. You genuinely worship this emperor as a god. He is the god-emperor of mankind, Thaddeus said firmly. To deny his divinity is heresy. Fascinating. Alucard's smile returned, but it was thoughtful now, analytical. In my world, I served Count Dracula for centuries. Then I served the Hellsing family. I've seen what happens when mortals declare themselves gods, and I've seen what happens when gods walk among mortals. But I've never seen an empire this large built on faith alone. He took a step forward. The blood angels tensed, but didn't fire. So here's my situation, Chaplain. I'm trapped in your universe, at least temporarily. I don't have any desire to fight you unless you make it necessary. I'm not interested in conquering anything or spreading chaos or whatever your enemies typically do. He spread his hands. I'm a soldier without orders, a weapon without a wielder. And in my experience, that's when things get interesting. Thaddeus considered. The tactical situation was complex. This creature, Alucard, had demonstrated capabilities that bordered on demonic, yet claimed to serve mortal authority willingly. It had survived concentrated fire from 6 space marines without apparent effort. Destroying it would require significant resources, possibly including the ship's plasma weapons or dedicated kill teams, and it was offering to talk. You will submit to restraint, Thaddeus said finally. You will accompany us to the ship's holding cells, where Librarian Mephiston will examine you thoroughly. If you resist, we will deploy the full might of this strike cruiser against you. Librarian Mephiston? Alucard's eyebrows rose. Another title I don't recognize. Is he your chief interrogator? He is our chief librarian, the most powerful psyker in the Blood Angels, perhaps in the entire Imperium. If you possess any taint of chaos, any demonic corruption, he will find it. Psyker. Telepath? Alucard nodded slowly. All right, that could be interesting. I've never had a psychic duel with someone who might actually pose a challenge. This is not a duel, Thaddeus said sharply. This is an examination. You will submit peacefully, or you'll try to destroy me. Yes, I understand the threat. Alucard's tone was amused. But let's be honest, Chaplain. You shot me approximately 40 times already, and I'm still standing here having a conversation. If I wanted to fight, I could have torn through your brothers before you finished your war cry. I could phase through your walls, hunt through your ship, turn your crew into ghouls, and generally make your existence miserable. The shadows in the observation bay seemed to deepen, responding to Alucard's words like loyal hounds awaiting command. But I'm not doing any of that, Alucard continued, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. Because I'm curious about you, about this Imperium of yours, about what kind of universe has monsters who call themselves angels. So yes, Chaplain Thaddeus of the Blood Angels, I will submit to your restraint. I will meet your librarian Mephiston. And we'll see whether he finds anything worse than what you're already looking at. He stepped forward, arms extended, wrists together in mock surrender. Take me to your cells. Let's find out if you can hold a real vampire. The holding cells aboard the Blade of Sanguinius were designed to contain the worst threats imaginable. Reinforced adamantium walls 3 meters thick, null field generators to suppress psychic abilities, blessed silver inscribed with prayers to the Emperor, auto turrets loaded with sanctified ammunition capable of tracking and firing in microseconds. These cells had held captured chaos sorcerers, Xenos witch lords, and even, on one terrible occasion, a Blood Angel's brother who had fallen to the Black Rage mid-mission and needed containment before he could be inducted into the Death Company. Alucard sat on the single metal bench, legs crossed, hat tilted back, looking utterly relaxed. Cozy, he said to the observation camera, though the interior design could use work. Everything's so utilitarian. Where's the drama, the ambiance? At least throw in a coffin or two. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus watched from the observation chamber, flanked by 3 veteran brothers and the ship's master of sanctity. Through the Armorcry's viewport, they could see Alucard examining his fingernails with apparent boredom. The null field generators hummed at full power, their psychic dampening effect strong enough that Thaddeus could feel the absence of the warp even through the reinforced walls. The null field appears to be affecting it, Brother Valen observed. Its aura is diminished, less pronounced. But not gone, Thaddeus noted. A true psyker would be writhing in pain. Demons would be banished outright. This creature merely seems inconvenienced. Because I'm not a psyker. Alucard's voice came through the Vox speakers, startling them. He waved at the camera. I can hear you. By the way, enhanced senses. The null field is annoying. Feels like trying to think through cotton, but my abilities don't rely on your warp. They're part of me. Biological, if you want to call it that. Though biology is a loose term for what I am. Thaddeus activated the Vox. You will remain silent until Librarian Mephiston arrives. Will I? Alucard smiled. Or will I sit here in this cell you think can hold me, tolerating your paranoia because I'm choosing to cooperate? There's a difference, Chaplain. One you should probably understand before you push too far. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Thaddeus's hand moved to his holstered bolt pistol, then stopped. The creature was right. It had submitted voluntarily. Starting a fight in the holding cells would be catastrophic if conventional containment failed. Mephiston will arrive within the hour, Thaddeus said. Until then, you will answer questions. Finally, proper interrogation. Alucard sat up straighter, giving the camera his full attention. Ask away, Chaplain. I'm an open book. Well, a book written in blood and bound in human skin, but open nonetheless. Your master, this Integra Hellsing, what manner of authority does she wield? Direct authority from the crown. In my world, Britain maintains several secret organizations dedicated to handling supernatural threats. Hellsing is the Protestant solution. Crosses, blessed silver, faith-based weapons, that sort of thing. We hunt vampires, eliminate ghouls, and generally keep the monsters from overrunning London. He paused. Or we did. I have no idea if any of that still exists, given that I'm apparently in a different universe now. And you served her willingly? I serve her because she's worthy of service. Alucard's expression grew serious. When her father died, she inherited the organization and my loyalty. She was 13 years old, terrified, and facing down a vampire attack in her own home. I tested her, gave her a choice between becoming a vampire herself or facing death as a human. She chose death. Told me that a life as a monster wasn't worth living. The Blood Angels exchanged glances. That philosophy resonated deeply. I respected that, Alucard continued. She had the strength to refuse immortality, to face oblivion rather than compromise her humanity. So I served her, gave her the power to command me absolutely, because that kind of strength, moral strength, not physical, is rarer than any supernatural ability. Yet you call yourself a monster without shame, Brother Valen said, because I am one. I've killed thousands, fed on innocents and guilty alike, reveled in the slaughter because that's what I was created to do. Alucard leaned back against the cell wall. But I'm a monster with a leash. The difference between me and the enemies I hunt is that I acknowledge what I am. I don't pretend to be noble. I don't dress up slaughter as righteousness. We are righteous, Thaddeus said coldly. We fight in the Emperor's name, for humanity's survival. Do you? Alucard's eyes gleamed. Or do you fight because you were built to fight, and righteousness is the story you tell yourselves to justify the blood? I've been in your heads, Chaplain. Just surface thoughts before your null field kicked in, but enough to taste your memories, the red thirst, the black rage, the death company. The temperature in the observation chamber seemed to drop. Speaking of the Blood Angel's curse so casually bordered on blasphemy, you have brothers who go mad, Alucard continued, his voice softer now. They relive your primarch's death over and over, trapped in the final moments of his sacrifice. And when they fall, you paint their armor black and send them to die in glorious suicide charges because there's no cure, no redemption, just a warrior's death before they become too far gone. You know nothing, Thaddeus began. I know everything about curses, Chaplain. I've lived with mine for half a millennium. Alucard stood, walking to the center of the cell. "The difference is, you see yours as a trial to overcome, a burden to bear with honor. I see mine as what it is, a fundamental part of my nature. Neither good nor evil. Just true." The cell door opened. No alarms sounded. The locking mechanisms simply disengaged with a hydraulic hiss. Alucard made no move to exit, merely stood there as the door swung wide, proving his point wordlessly. "Emperor's blood," Brother Valen whispered. "How did it—" A presence entered the corridor. Not walking, manifesting, as if reality had simply decided he should be there. The figure wore crimson Terminator armor marked with psychic wards and the iconography of the Librarius. Golden blonde hair framed a face that was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, and his eyes blazed with barely contained psychic fire. Lord Mephiston, chief librarian of the Blood Angels, had arrived. He looked at the open cell door, then at Alucard standing calmly inside, then at the observation chamber where Thaddeus and the others watched in stunned silence. "The cell did not fail," Mephiston said, his voice resonant with power. "The creature allowed itself to be contained, and now demonstrates that our prison was always illusory." He turned his full attention to Alucard. "You make your point, vampire. You are here by choice, not compulsion." "Finally," Alucard said, "someone who understands. You must be the librarian." "I am Mephiston, chief librarian of the Blood Angels, master of the Librarius, he who conquered the Black Rage." The titles rolled off his tongue like weapons. "I have walked through the warp itself and returned. I have faced demons and madness, and emerged with my soul intact. And I will see the truth of what you are." "Then let's begin," Alucard said, stepping fully out of the cell. "Though I should warn you, my mind isn't like others you've encountered. The souls I've consumed aren't gone. They're still here, still aware. All 3 million of them. Are you prepared to face that?" Mephiston's expression didn't change. "I have gazed into the eye of terror and seen the birth of gods. Your collection of mortal souls does not frighten me." "Good." Alucard's smile was genuine now, pleased. "Then this will actually be interesting." The two predators stood 5 meters apart in the corridor, surrounded by anxious space marines who suddenly felt like spectators at an event far beyond their comprehension. Mephiston raised one armored hand, psychic energy crackling around his fingers like captured lightning. "Open your mind, vampire. Let me see what you truly are." Alucard closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they had changed. The red irises were gone, replaced by something older. Black sclera shot through with crimson veins, pupils that burned like dying stars. His form seemed to shimmer, becoming less solid, more conceptual. Shadows pooled at his feet, and within those shadows, faces began to appear. Hundreds, thousands, screaming silently. "Come then, librarian, let me show you 500 years of death." Mephiston's psychic probe lanced forward, a spear of pure mental force that would have shattered a normal human's consciousness instantly. It struck Alucard's mind and sank, not breaking through a barrier but plunging into an ocean of accumulated souls. Mephiston's consciousness followed, diving deep, and what he found made even his iron discipline waver. Layers upon layers of death. A castle in Wallachia, 1476. A man named Vlad choosing damnation over defeat. A deal with something ancient and hungry. The taste of blood becoming more than sustenance, becoming identity. Centuries of hunting, killing, consuming. Wars fought in shadows. The Hellsing family binding him, chaining him, giving him purpose through servitude. And underneath it all, a terrible loneliness. An immortal waiting for someone, anyone, to be strong enough to end him. Mephiston pulled back, his psychic probe withdrawing. He stood silent for a long moment, processing what he had witnessed. Around him, the blood angels waited, weapons ready, uncertain whether to intervene. "You are not corrupt," Mephiston said finally. "Not tainted by chaos, not possessed by demons. You are..." He paused, searching for words. "You are a weapon that has forgotten it was once a man. A monster who craves death because immortality has become unbearable." Alucard's eyes returned to their normal crimson. "Accurate assessment, librarian. 10 points to your Imperium." "But you are also dangerous," Mephiston continued. "Not through malice, but through nature. You exist to consume, to kill, to challenge. Leaving you free would be catastrophic. Destroying you would require resources we cannot spare, which leaves cooperation." "I'm listening." Mephiston turned to Thaddeus. "Brother Chaplain, we make landfall on Sangreal Proxima in 6 hours. The Orc forces there have overrun 3 Imperial Guard regiments. Command has requested Blood Angels' intervention." He looked back at Alucard. "The vampire will accompany us. We will see how it performs in battle. If it fights with honor, we discuss long-term arrangement. If it proves treacherous, we will find a way to end it, regardless of cost." "A trial by combat," Alucard said, satisfaction in his voice. "Now that's a language I understand." "This is highly irregular," Thaddeus protested. "To allow an unsanctioned Xenos..." "He is not Xenos," Mephiston interrupted. "His genetic structure is human, merely altered. Corrupted, perhaps, but recognizably of Terra's children. And he is a warrior. That much is clear." The chief librarian's psychic presence pressed outward, filling the corridor with tangible force. "The Emperor's angels do not fear collaboration with monsters, Brother Chaplain. After all, what are we but monsters in his service?" The words hung in the air like a benediction and a curse. Alucard laughed, a sound of pure delight. "Oh, I like you, Mephiston. You see it. The truth everyone else dances around. We're both damn things pretending we have souls worth saving." "No," Mephiston said quietly. "We are damn things who fight anyway, because damnation does not excuse us from duty. There is a difference." "Is there? I suppose we'll find out." Alucard adjusted his hat, straightened his coat. "So, orcs, you said? Large, aggressive, green-skinned warriors who fight for the joy of fighting? You've encountered them?" "No, but I'm extrapolating from context. They sound delightful." Alucard's smile was sharp. "It's been too long since I've faced an enemy that actually enjoys dying. This should be refreshing." Sangreal Proxima burned. From orbit, the planet looked like a wound in the void. Cities reduced to smoking craters, hab blocks transformed into mass graves, green fungal growths spreading across the landscape like infection through flesh. The orc Wag had descended on the agri-world 3 weeks ago, and what the Imperial Guard couldn't hold, they had burned rather than let fall to Xenos' hands. Now the Blood Angels would reclaim it, or die trying. Alucard stood in the drop pod's deployment bay, surrounded by space marines who kept their distance. He cut an absurd figure among the armored giants, a tall man in a red coat, no visible armor, carrying only 2 oversized pistols that Brother Sergeant Erasmus had examined with deep skepticism. 13mm rounds, Erasmus had said, holding the Casole pistol like it was a relic from the dark age of technology. Custom ammunition, blessed silver jacketing, mercury-filled cores designed to fragment on impact. Impressive for a primitive firearm, but against orc physiology. "They'll work," Alucard had replied, taking the gun back. "Trust me, I've killed bigger things than orcs with these." Now, as the drop pod shuddered in preparation for launch, Alucard watched the Blood Angels perform their pre-battle rituals. Bolt shells were blessed, armor seals were checked, prayers were muttered to the Emperor and the Great Angel. The atmosphere was thick with barely controlled aggression, the red thirst rising in anticipation of slaughter. Alucard felt it like a physical presence. The hunger, the need. These warriors craved blood as much as he did, perhaps more, because they fought against it while he had long ago surrendered to his nature. "You feel it," Mephiston said, watching him from across the deployment bay. The chief librarian had chosen to accompany this drop personally, equal parts observer and executioner if Alucard proved treacherous. "The thirst?" "Yes." Alucard met his gaze. "It's like standing in a room full of starving predators trying to convince themselves they're vegetarians. The tension is exquisite." "We master it through discipline," Brother Chaplain Thaddeus said sharply. "Through faith in the Emperor and the teachings of our primarch. We are not slaves to our genetics." "No," Alucard agreed. "You're prisoners. There's a difference." The drop pod's harness system activated, adamantium clamps securing the Space Marines in place. Alucard remained standing, unrestrained, balanced perfectly, despite the violent shaking as the blade of Sanguinius positioned for orbital insertion. "You should secure yourself," Erasmus said. "The G-forces during descent will—" "I'll be fine. The impact alone generates enough force to liquefy unaugmented humans." "I said I'll be fine." The launch klaxon sounded. Reality compressed as the drop pod shot from the cruiser like a bullet from a gun, screaming through the atmosphere at terminal velocity. Inside, the Blood Angels bore the crushing acceleration with practiced stoicism, their enhanced physiology and armor protecting them from forces that would turn normal men into paste. Alucard stood in the center of the pod, coat billowing around him, completely unbothered. The shadows at his feet had grown darker, deeper, as if the G-forces were pulling darkness itself from his body. His eyes blazed crimson, and when he smiled, his fangs seemed longer, sharper. "Magnificent," he said over the roar of atmospheric entry. "It's been decades since I felt this alive." The ground rushed up to meet them. The drop pod's retro thrusters fired, barely slowing their descent. Impact came like the Emperor's judgment, brutal, absolute, and utterly unforgiving. The pod cratered into the surface of Sangreal Proxima, plowing through 20 meters of soil and rockcrete before finally stopping. The assault ramps blew open with explosive force. The Blood Angels charged out in perfect formation, bolters raised, scanning for targets. Mephiston emerged wreathed in psychic fire, his force staff crackling with lethal energy. Alucard simply walked out, dusting off his coat as if he'd merely stepped off a transport. They had landed in what used to be an Imperial Guard command post. Now it was an orc camp, crude fortifications built from wrecked Chimera transports, cookfires burning with the corpses of human defenders and orcs. Dozens of them. Massive green-skinned brutes covered in crude armor, wielding guns that looked like they'd been assembled from scrap metal and faith in violence. The nearest orc was easily 3 meters tall, its tusked face splitting into a grin as it registered the new arrivals. "Umis!" it bellowed in a voice like grinding rocks. "The big Yumis in the shiny armor! Wag!" The roar was taken up by every orc in the camp. They charged, a green tide of muscle and aggression, guns firing wildly, blades raised, absolutely certain of victory because fighting was what orcs lived for, and dying was just part of the fun. The Blood Angels met them with disciplined fury. Bolter fire erupted in controlled bursts, each shot placed with surgical precision. Mass reactive rounds tore through orc flesh, detonating inside their bodies, turning muscle to pulp and bone to shrapnel. The Space Marines advanced in textbook formation, overlapping fields of fire, tactical spacing, centuries of combat doctrine made manifest. Alucard drew the Kasul and Jackal pistols and began shooting. The sound was obscene. 2 hand cannons firing in rapid succession, each shot echoing like artillery. The first orc's head exploded in a spray of green blood and brain matter. The second took a round through the chest that punched a hole big enough to see daylight through. The third lost its right arm at the shoulder, staggered, and then lost its head to the follow-up shot. Alucard walked forward slowly, almost casually, firing with both hands. He didn't aim in any conventional sense, just pointed and pulled triggers, each shot finding lethal purchase with supernatural accuracy. Orcs fell before him like wheat before a scythe, and he was laughing. "Finally!" His voice carried over the chaos of battle. "Something that doesn't die politely." An orc knob, a particularly massive specimen covered in spiked armor and wielding a chain axe the size of a grown man, charged directly at him with a bellow that shook the ground. Alucard holstered his pistols, spread his arms wide, and simply stood there as the orc brought its weapon down in a devastating overhead chop. The chain axe struck. It bit deep into Alucard's shoulder, tearing through cloth and flesh, carving down through his torso in a spray of black blood. The orc grinned in triumph, right until Alucard's hand shot out and grabbed its throat. "My turn." Alucard's fingers punched through the orc's neck like it was made of paper. He squeezed, and the knob's spine shattered with a sound like breaking branches. As the massive Xenos collapsed, Alucard pulled his hand free, bringing arterial spray with it. The black blood coating him began to move, flowing back into his body, the wound closing as if it had never existed. The chain axe fell to the ground, still running, blade choked with gore. Brother Erasmus, having just dispatched 3 orcs with his chainsword, stared in fascination and horror. "By the throne, it regenerated from bisection." "Messy," Alucard said, examining his ruined coat with theatrical disappointment. This was expensive tailoring. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a good tailor in London?" An orc fired a massive slug thrower point blank into Alucard's back. The rounds, crude armor-piercing bullets the size of human fingers, tore through him, exiting out his chest in a cone of shrapnel and liquefied organs. Alucard turned around, looked at the orc with mild annoyance, and then his shadow moved. It rose from the ground like living smoke, forming into the shape of a massive hellhound with eyes like burning coals. The shadow beast lunged, its jaws closing around the orc's head. There was a crunch, a spray of green blood, and the orc's headless body toppled backward. "Good boy," Alucard said to the shadow, which dissolved back into darkness at his feet. Mephiston had been observing while systematically obliterating orcs with psychic force. Now he sent a telepathic pulse to all blood angels in the combat zone. "The vampire fights well. Do not interfere unless he proves treacherous." The battle raged for 7 more minutes. The orcs, despite their losses, kept coming with the single-minded enthusiasm that made them one of the galaxy's most persistent threats. They didn't retreat, didn't show fear. They just fought until they died. And some kept fighting even after lethal wounds because pain was just another sensation to enjoy. Alucard loved them for it. He waded into the thickest concentration of enemies, both pistols firing until the magazines ran dry, then drew them again, fully loaded as if he'd never fired a shot. When orcs got too close, he let them hit him, let them carve chunks from his body, let them think they were winning. Then he would phase through their attacks, reforming behind them and strike with bare hands that hit like pile drivers. At one point, an orc managed to chain him with a salvaged power fist, driving him down to one knee. Alucard's spine shattered, his legs went limp, and for 3 seconds he was genuinely vulnerable. Then his eyes changed. The crimson faded to pure black shot through with stars. His shadow expanded exponentially, covering 50 meters in all directions, and from that shadow, things began to emerge. Spectral soldiers in World War II uniforms, medieval knights in rusted armor, victims from centuries past, all wearing the faces of death. They rose like a tide of ghosts, surrounding the orcs, and when they touched the living, the greenskins began to wither. "Restraint level 2 release," Alucard's voice echoed with the resonance of millions. "Cromwell approval recognized. Deploying familiars." The spectral army fell upon the orcs with silent fury. They couldn't be killed because they were already dead. Manifestations of souls Alucard had consumed, now weaponized. The orcs fought back with bewildered rage, hacking at enemies that reformed from their own shadows, shooting at targets that felt no pain. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus felt his blood run cold. "Sorcery. This is warp." "It's not the warp," Mephiston said quietly, his psychic senses reading the phenomenon with perfect clarity. "It's him. Those are the souls he's absorbed, given temporary form, not demons, not possessed corpses. Memory and will made manifest through his power." The orc knob that had struck Alucard down now found itself surrounded by a dozen spectral figures. They swarmed it, dragging it down through sheer weight of numbers. The knob's bellows of fury turned to confusion, then to something that might have been fear, as its life force began draining away, pulled into the shadows, consumed. Alucard stood, his spine knitting back together with audible cracks. The power fist that had struck him fell away, its wielder reduced to a desiccated husk. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and recalled his familiars with a gesture. The spectral army flowed back into his shadow like water down a drain. "Acceptable warm-up," he said to no one in particular. "Though I expected orcs to last longer, these seemed small." "Those were standard orc warriors," Erasmus said, approaching cautiously. "The real threats are deeper in the war zone. War bosses, knobs, mechs with heavy weapons. What we just fought was a scouting party." Alucard's grin widened. "Even better." A roar split the air, deeper, louder, carrying across kilometers. In the distance, something massive moved through the ruins of what used to be Sangreal Proxima's capital city. Something that made the ground shake with each footstep. The orc response to the Blood Angel's arrival had begun in earnest. Mephiston extended his psychic awareness, reading the battlefield. Thousands of orcs converging on their position, war engines moving into range, and at the center, a psychic presence that burned with pure green brutality, a war boss, magnifying the field through sheer conviction that orcs were meant to fight and win. "The main force approaches," Mephiston announced. "We hold this position until reinforcements arrive. The Emperor protects." "The Emperor protects," the Blood Angels responded in unison. Alucard checked his pistols, smiled at the approaching army, and said something that would have been heresy if anyone had been listening closely enough to object. "Let's find out if your Emperor's protection is better than immortality." The orc wag hit like a living tsunami. They came in a green tide that stretched from horizon to horizon, thousands of the brutal Xenos pouring through ruined streets, clambering over wrecked vehicles, firing wildly into the air because the sound of gunfire was almost as good as actually hitting something. War buggies mounted with oversized guns careened through rubble. Deaf dreads, hulking mechanical walkers piloted by orcs wired directly into their war machines, stomped forward on hydraulic legs, their crude weapons systems tracking for targets. And behind them all, towering over the horde like a monument to violence, came the war boss. It stood nearly 5 meters tall, a mountain of muscle wrapped in armor plates looted from a dozen different sources. Imperial tank plating bolted to Astartes ceramite. Festooned with trophies taken from kills spanning decades, its power claw crackled with stolen energy, and the massive shooter it carried in its other hand looked like it had been assembled from 3 different heavy weapons welded together with faith and fungus-fueled ingenuity. "Come on, den, ya gits!" The war boss's voice carried over the roar of the approaching horde. "Let's see how tough Deezy shiny Yumis really are! Wag!" The Blood Angels had fortified the command post with ruthless efficiency, barricades constructed from drop pod debris. Fire lanes calculated for maximum killing efficiency. Heavy bolters positioned to create overlapping fields of death. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus stood at the center, Crozius Arcanum raised high, leading his brothers in a prayer that doubled as a war chant. We are the sons of Sanguinius, born of blood and tempered in war. We do not yield, we do not falter. For the Emperor and the great angel, we stand eternal. For the Emperor and Sanguinius! 50 blood angels roared in response. Alucard stood slightly apart from the defensive formation, conspicuously unprotected by cover, watching the approaching army with the expression of a connoisseur examining a particularly fine vintage. Now this, he said appreciatively. This is more like it. Overwhelming numbers, crude but effective weaponry, an enemy that genuinely believes it will win through sheer enthusiasm. He drew both pistols. It's been too long since I faced impossible odds. Mephiston, positioned on a ruined wall to gain elevation for his psychic strikes, glanced at the vampire. You've faced worse than this? Nazi vampire army, remember? 10,000 strong, backed by airships, sorcery, and a vampire major who could walk through walls. This is comparable. Alucard's smile was sharp. Of course I had backup then. An apprentice, a skilled marksman, and my master's orders. Here I have you lot. Let's see if post-human warriors are as effective as baseline humans with blessed ammunition. You will witness the Emperor's finest, Thaddeus said coldly. And you will see why the Adeptus Astartes are the bulwark against the darkness. I'm counting on it. The orcs hit weapon range. The blood angels opened fire with devastating precision. Heavy bolters roared, cutting swaths through the leading edge of the horde. Individual space marines picked targets with practiced expertise, knobs organizing the rabble, mechs carrying heavy weapons, anything that looked like leadership. Mass reactive rounds found their marks with mechanical regularity, and orcs died by the dozens. They didn't slow down. For every orc that fell, 5 more charged forward, howling with joy, firing their crude slug throwers and stubbers without bothering to aim properly. The sheer volume of incoming fire began to tell. Bullets ricocheted off ceramite armor, last fire from looted Imperial weapons left scorch marks on blessed plate, and the occasional rocket streaked overhead, detonating against the command post's remaining walls. Alucard started shooting. The Castle and Jackal barked in alternating rhythm, each shot perfectly placed despite the chaos. An orc's knee exploded, sending it tumbling into the path of its fellows. Another took a round through the eye socket that punched out the back of its skull. A third fired a rocket launcher directly at Alucard's position. The vampire shot the rocket mid-flight, detonating it prematurely and engulfing a dozen orcs in the blast radius. "Show off!" Brother Erasmus shouted over the din, chainsword idling in his grip as he waited for melee range. "Accuracy is a virtue!" Alucard shouted back, clearly enjoying himself. The first wave reached the barricades. Orcs threw themselves forward with reckless abandon, climbing over their own dead, swinging choppas and crude axes, bellowing war cries in their brutal language. The Blood Angels met them with cold precision. Chainswords carved through green flesh, power fists pulverized bone, bolt pistols fired point-blank into screaming faces. This was where the red thirst rose hungriest. In melee, surrounded by blood and violence, the Blood Angels felt the curse pulling at their discipline, the need to rend, to tear, to feast. They fought it with prayer and training, channeling the urge into combat efficiency rather than mindless savagery. Most of them succeeded. Brother Dante, not the chapter master, but a younger warrior bearing an honored name, fell too deep into the bloodlust. His chainsword became a blur, hacking at orcs with mechanical repetition long after they'd stopped moving. His vox feed became a stream of incoherent snarls. When an orc managed to land a glancing blow with a power claw, Brother Dante didn't fall back for support. He lunged forward, tackling the Xenos, tearing at its throat with his helmet's faceplate. "Brother Dante!" Thaddeus's voice cut through the combat chatter. "Maintain discipline!" But Dante was lost. The red thirst had him completely. He stood over the orc's corpse, green blood dripping from his armor. And for a moment, the other blood angels could see what they all feared. One of their own transformed into the beast they carried within. Alucard appeared beside Dante in a blur of motion, grabbed the Space Marine's helmet, and forced eye contact. His own red eyes blazed with something between understanding and command. "Breathe, warrior. You're not gone yet. I can see the man still fighting inside. Don't give the beast everything. Make it earn every inch." Dante snarled, one armored hand moving to strike the vampire. Alucard didn't dodge, just stood there, letting the blow come. It never landed. Dante's hand stopped centimeters from Alucard's face, trembling with the effort of reasserting control. "Good," Alucard said quietly. "Just between them. You're stronger than the hunger. Remember that." He released Dante and phased backward as an orc knob charged through the melee, its massive choppa descending in an overhead strike that would have bisected them both. The blade passed through empty air where Alucard had been. Then the vampire reformed behind the knob and put 2 rounds through the back of its skull. Brother Dante stood for a moment, breathing heavily, combat protocols reasserting themselves over instinct. Then he retrieved his chainsword and returned to the firing line, fighting with renewed focus. Mephiston had observed the exchange with interest. The vampire understands bloodlust intimately. He recognizes it, perhaps even respects it. Curious. The psychic communication was answered by Alucard's thoughts, clear despite the null field's dampening effect. "I've lived with hunger for 500 years, librarian. I know every stage, the denial, the bargaining, the acceptance, the transcendence. Your brother was at the edge. I simply reminded him there's a choice, even when it doesn't feel like one. You breach my mind casually. You're broadcasting loudly enough that even baseline humans would hear you if they had the right sensitivity. I'm just listening." Their mental conversation was interrupted by a psychic shriek that made reality ripple. The war boss had entered the battlefield personally, and with it came a surge in the Wah field, that curious psychic phenomenon where orc belief shaped reality itself. The greenskins fought harder, moved faster, hit heavier because they believed they were winning. The massive alien stormed through its own forces, shoving smaller orcs aside, its power claw snapping with arcs of stolen lightning. It pointed directly at the Blood Angel's defensive position, specifically at Brother Chaplain Thaddeus. "You, the one with the skull face, you look like a proper fight. Come on, Den. Let's see if you got DACA or just talk." Thaddeus stepped forward, activating his jump pack, rising above the melee on pillars of fire. "By the Emperor's will and Sanguinius's blood, I will end you, Xenos filth." He descended like divine judgment, Crozius Arcanum blazing with power, aiming for the war boss's skull. The power weapon struck with enough force to crack tank armor, and rebounded off the war boss's reinforced cranium with a screech of tortured metal. The orc grinned, grabbed Thaddeus by the leg mid-flight, and slammed him into the ground hard enough to crack rockcrete. "Nice try, Yumi!" The power claw descended. Thaddeus rolled, barely avoiding being pulped, his armor's servo motors screaming with the effort. He came up swinging, the Crozius connecting with the war boss's midsection, energy discharge visible, armor plates cracking. The orc staggered back a step, then laughed and swung its massive shooter like a club. The improvised weapon caught Thaddeus across the chest, denting his sacred armor, sending him flying backward into a ruined wall. Warning runes lit up across his helmet display, cracked ceramite, damaged auto-reactive shoulder plate, minor internal injuries. Nothing fatal for a space marine, but concerning. Brother Erasmus and 4 others moved to support, forming a tactical squad around their chaplain. The war boss bellowed with delight and charged, Power Claw leading, ready to demonstrate why it had risen to command a wag. Alucard stepped into its path. The vampire stood alone, both pistols holstered, hands at his sides, directly in front of 5 meters of angry orc war boss moving at full sprint. The Blood Angels shouted warnings. Mephiston prepared to intervene with psychic force. The war boss swung its power claw in a strike that would have decapitated a dreadnought. Alucard caught it. His bare hand closed around the power claw's energized fingers, stopping the massive weapon cold. Electricity arced through his body, flesh blackening, bones visible through burned tissue. He didn't flinch, didn't move. Just stood there, holding the war boss's weapon, looking up at the towering alien with a smile that promised suffering. "My turn!" His other hand shot forward, fingers extended like a spear, and punched through the war boss's chest armor. Not around it, not between the plates. Through it, as if the looted tank plating was tissue paper. His arm sank in up to the elbow, and when he pulled back, he was holding the war boss's still beating heart. The massive orc looked down at the hole in its chest, then at its heart in Alucard's hand, then back at the vampire. Its expression shifted from battle fury to something approaching confusion. "That's mine," the war boss said. "Not anymore." Alucard crushed the heart in his fist, black blood mixing with green ichor. "You wanted a proper fight. I'm giving you death instead. There's a difference." The war boss toppled backward like a felled tree, armor clanging against rubble. Its massive body twitching as its nervous system realized it should be dead. "The wag!" Field stuttered, flickered, began to collapse as its primary anchor ceased to exist. The surrounding orcs stopped mid-charge, looking at their fallen leader, then at the small Umi in the red coat who had killed it with his bare hand. For perhaps the first time in their violent lives, the orcs experienced something approaching tactical uncertainty. Alucard raised the war boss's heart above his head and squeezed, letting the blood rain down over him in a grotesque parody of a victorious warrior bathing in his enemy's essence. Then he dropped the ruined organ and drew his pistols. Next! The orcs, being orcs, decided that dying fighting was better than not fighting at all. They charged, and Alucard met them with a smile. The battle lasted another 43 minutes. Without their war boss anchoring the wag field, the orcs lost cohesion. Some fought with increased desperation, as if dying gloriously could somehow restore what they'd lost. Others began squabbling amongst themselves over who should lead now, settling the question through brutal internecine violence that killed as many greenskins as the Blood Angels' bolters. A few, the smallest and most cowardly, actually attempted to flee, only to be gunned down by their own kind for showing weakness. Alucard waded through it all like a force of nature. He had stopped using his pistols after the first 10 minutes, holstering them in favor of more direct methods. His hands tore through orc flesh with casual brutality. When he was swarmed by 5 orcs simultaneously, he phased through their attacks and reformed inside their formation, his shadows manifesting as dozens of writhing tendrils that impaled them from within. When an orc deaf dread stomped toward him, hydraulic legs shaking the ground, he simply looked at it, and something in his gaze made the pilot inside scream and abandon the war machine entirely. The Blood Angels fought with their characteristic precision, but even they couldn't help watching the vampire work with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. This wasn't combat. This was art. Terrible, beautiful art, painted in green blood and black ichor. Brother Erasmus found himself fighting beside Alucard at one point, both of them surrounded by a mob of orc boys. The Space Marine's chainsword carved through 2 orcs in a single sweep, blessed teeth chewing through muscle and bone. Beside him, Alucard caught an orc's choppa mid-swing, snapped the crude blade with his bare hand, and drove the broken end through its wielder's eye socket. "You fight well," Erasmus said between strikes, his breathing controlled despite the exertion, "for something that claims to be undead." "Death doesn't mean weakness, Brother Sergeant." Alucard ducked under a wild swing, came up inside the orc's guard, and delivered an open palm strike that caved in its sternum. "It just means I've had more time to practice killing. Do you enjoy it? The slaughter? Would it bother you if I said yes?" Erasmus executed a perfect pivot, Chainsword screaming as it disemboweled an orc knob attempting to flank them. "We are taught that combat is sacred, that killing in the Emperor's name is holy duty, not pleasure. To enjoy bloodshed is to court the red thirst, to invite the curse that damns us. And yet you're smiling behind that helmet." Alucard caught another orc by the throat, lifted it off the ground despite its considerable mass, and threw it into 3 of its fellows with enough force to hear bones snap. "I can hear it in your voice. The satisfaction, the rightness of combat. Don't lie to me about not enjoying this." Erasmus wanted to deny it, wanted to recite scripture about duty and sacrifice and the burden of the Emperor's angels. But the words stuck in his throat because Alucard was right. There was satisfaction in this. In testing his skills against worthy opponents. In the perfect execution of techniques drilled into him over decades. In the simple primal joy of surviving when lesser beings would fall. "The difference," Erasmus said finally, pulling his chainsword free from an orc's spine, "is that we recognize the danger in that satisfaction. We guard against it becoming something more, something that consumes us." "Good answer." Alucard's tone was approving. "Honest, at least. I respect that more than false piety." The last organized orc resistance collapsed 20 minutes later when Mephiston unleashed a psychic strike that literally boiled the brains of 30 greenskins simultaneously. The survivors, barely 24 from a force that had numbered in the thousands, scattered into the ruins, pursued by tactical squads who would hunt them down over the following hours. The Blood Angels regrouped at the command post, performing immediate after-action protocols, ammunition counts, casualty reports, armor damage assessment. The post-battle routine of warriors who had done this 1,000 times before. Alucard stood apart, surveying the carnage with evident satisfaction. His red coat was absolutely drenched in blood, both his own black ichor and the orc's green vitae. It should have been ruined beyond repair, yet as he stood there, the blood began evaporating, mist rising from the fabric until it was pristine once more. Even the tears and bullet holes closed, threads weaving themselves together as if time was running backward. "Sorcery," Brother Chaplain Thaddeus said, approaching with his Crozius still active. His armor bore the dents and scorch marks of close combat, proof that even space marines weren't invulnerable. "That coat repairs itself through warp manipulation." "Not the warp," Alucard corrected absently, still watching the mist rise. "Just an enchantment. Very old magic, predating your Imperium by millennia. The coat is bound to me the same way my pistols are. They're not really separate objects anymore, just extensions of my will given physical form." He turned to face Thaddeus. "Your armor doesn't repair itself?" "Our armor is maintained by chapter serfs and tech marines, blessed by the Mechanicus, inscribed with prayers to the machine god. It is sacred, but not sentient." "Shame. Seems inefficient." "Efficiency is not the point. The rituals of maintenance remind us that even the Emperor's chosen must care for their war gear with humility and dedication." Thaddeus deactivated his Crozius, mag locking it to his belt. "You fought well, vampire. I will not deny that. Your kill count exceeded several of my veteran brothers. Is this where you offer me a position in your chapter?" Alucard's tone was amused. "I've read enough of your surface thoughts to know how this works. Impressive performance leads to recruitment offers, usually accompanied by indoctrination and genetic modification. You are no candidate for the Blood Angels," Thaddeus said coldly. Our gene seed is sacred, drawn from Sanguinius himself. We do not pollute that lineage with Xeno's biology. I'm human biology. Heavily modified, admittedly, but human. You are an abomination that was human. There is a difference. Thaddeus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Alucard could hear. But you are also a weapon of considerable power, and the Imperium has always been pragmatic about employing weapons, regardless of their nature. Lord Mephiston wishes to speak with you, privately. Alucard glanced toward where the chief librarian stood on a pile of rubble, his psychic presence like a beacon even without actively broadcasting. Your executioner wants to have words. Should I be flattered or concerned? That depends entirely on what he's decided about you. They found Mephiston standing before the war boss's corpse, examining the massive hole Alucard had punched through its chest armor. The chief librarian's psychic senses traced the edges of the wound, reading the residual energy signature, cataloging the impossible physics required to accomplish such a feat with bare hands. Strength beyond the physical, Mephiston said without preamble. You didn't simply overpower the armor. You rejected its right to resist. Imposed your will upon reality itself and declared that metal should part before your hand. He looked up at Alucard. That is not biology. That is metaphysical authority. The kind demons use when they manifest in real space. And yet I'm not a demon, Alucard replied. We've established this. Your psychic examination found no warp taint, no demonic possession, no chaos corruption. Just a vampire and 3 million souls. Which brings me to my concern. Mephiston descended from the rubble, moving with the fluid grace of a consummate warrior despite his Terminator armor's bulk. Those souls you carry, they're not passengers. They're ammunition, fuel. Every time you manifest them as familiars, you're burning through their essence. Eventually, you'll run out. What happens then? Alucard was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering the question. I've never run out before. In 500 years, I've consumed enough souls to last millennia. But theoretically, if I exhausted my reservoir completely? He smiled, but it lacked his usual theatrical menace. Then I'd probably die. Finally. Permanently. No regeneration, no resurrection, just ending. You want that, Mephiston said. It wasn't a question. I want a death worthy of the life I've lived. I want to fall in battle against an opponent who truly surpasses me, not fade away from attrition or accident. Alucard's crimson eyes met Mephiston's gaze without flinching. I've been searching for that death for centuries. That's why I serve. Because servitude to a worthy master means facing worthy opponents. In my universe, I hoped Integra would eventually find someone or something capable of ending me. Here. He gestured at the battlefield, at the blood angels performing their post-combat rituals, at the smoking ruins of a world caught in eternal war. Here, I suspect I'll find that death sooner rather than later. Your Imperium is drowning in apocalyptic threats. Gods of chaos. Hive fleets that devour planets. Ancient machines that killed gods. One of them will eventually prove strong enough. And I'll finally rest. Mephiston studied him for a long moment, psychic senses reading the absolute sincerity in Alucard's words. Most beings fear death. Even space marines who train for it accept it as duty rather than desire. You pursue it actively. Because immortality without purpose is torture, librarian. I learned that centuries ago. The only thing worse than dying is not dying when you should. Alucard looked down at his hands, flexing fingers that had torn through armor and flesh alike. Every creature should have an end. To deny that is to reject the fundamental truth of existence, that all things pass, and there's beauty in that impermanence. Heretical philosophy by imperial standards, Mephiston noted. The Emperor is immortal. The Imperium is eternal. To suggest otherwise is treasonous. Then I'm a traitor to an empire I never swore allegiance to. Will you execute me for philosophical differences? No. Mephiston turned away, looking out over the ruins of Sangreal Proxima. Because despite your death wish, despite your monstrous nature, you fought for human survival today. You protected Brother Dante when the Red Thirst took him. You killed efficiently and without unnecessary cruelty. Whatever you are, vampire, you are not our enemy. What am I then? Your ally? You are... Mephiston paused, choosing his words with care. You are a weapon that acknowledges its nature, a monster who fights other monsters. In the 41st millennium, that makes you valuable, possibly even necessary. He turned back to face Alucard directly. The Blood Angels are returning to Baal, our homeworld. Chapter Master Dante has summoned all forces for a gathering of significant importance. You will accompany us. You will meet our Lord Commander. You will witness our chapter's sacred traditions, and we will determine whether you can serve alongside the sons of Sanguinius without corruption. And if I refuse, then you will remain here on Sangreal Proxima, alone in a universe not your own, without resources or allies, until something kills you or you fade into irrelevance. Mephiston's expression was implacable. The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds, vampire. You have two choices: integrate and find purpose, or wander until entropy claims you. Choose. Alucard laughed, genuine amusement rather than mockery. You're offering me servitude again, just with different masters and different terms. How perfectly predictable. He adjusted his hat, his coat settling around him like a crimson shroud. Very well, Lord Mephiston. I'll come to Baal. I'll meet your chapter master. I'll witness these sacred traditions, and we'll see if the sons of Sanguinius are worthy of fighting alongside a no-life king. No-life king? What the Nazis called me. A creature that exists in defiance of death itself. Alucard's smile was sharp. Though in your Imperium, I suspect that's not particularly unique. How many of your heroes refuse to die properly? How many martyrs return as walking corpses in dreadnought shells? How many saints manifest from the warp to lead battles millennia after their physical deaths? That is different. They serve the Emperor's will. Do they? Or do they serve because the alternative, true death, true ending, is more terrifying than eternal service? Alucard walked past Mephiston, heading toward where the Blood Angels were preparing for extraction. Think about it, librarian. Your chapter is cursed with bloodlust and death visions. You fight the Red Thirst and the Black Rage every day. You're all just warriors trying to die with dignity before the curse takes everything. And here I am, a creature who embraced the curse and made it his strength. He stopped, looked back over his shoulder. Maybe I'm not the one who needs to learn from you. Maybe it's the other way around. Mephiston stood alone on the battlefield, watching the vampire walk away, and for the first time in decades, he felt genuine uncertainty about a decision he'd made. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus approached, his armor's servo motors whining softly. Lord Mephiston, the Thunderhawks are ready for extraction. What are your orders regarding the guest? He accompanies us to Baal, Mephiston said quietly. And may the Emperor forgive us if that proves to be a mistake. Baal was a world that had died and refused to admit it. From orbit, the Blood Angels' homeworld looked like a corpse. Irradiated wastelands stretched across continents, the atmosphere permanently stained rust-red from millennia of nuclear fallout. Only the fortress monastery of the chapter stood pristine, a Gothic cathedral fortress rising from the desolation like a monument to defiance. Towers reached toward the toxic sky, adorned with statues of angels and martyrs, every surface inscribed with prayers and battle honors dating back 10,000 years. Alucard stood in the observation deck of the Blade of Sanguinius, watching Baal grow larger in the viewport, and felt something unexpected. recognition. "It reminds you of something," Mephiston said, standing beside him. The chief librarian had been watching Alucard's reactions carefully since they'd entered the Baal system. "Wallachia," Alucard said quietly. "My homeland, before I became this, before the Ottoman invasion, before the wars that turned me into a monster. It was beautiful once. Green valleys, mountain ranges, rivers that ran clean. By the time I was done defending it, the land was salted with blood and ash. Nothing grew for decades." He gestured at the viewport. "Your world has that same quality. The corpse of something that used to matter." "Baal endures," Mephiston said firmly. "It may be wounded, but it survives, as do we." "Survival isn't the same as living, librarian. Trust me on that." The Thunderhawk carrying them descended through Baal's atmosphere, passing through layers of radioactive clouds that would have killed unprotected humans in seconds. The fortress monastery grew larger, its impossible architecture defying both gravity and good sense. Flying buttresses spanning kilometers, statues the size of hab blocks, stained glass windows that depicted Sanguinius's greatest victories in scenes so detailed they could be studied for years. They landed on a platform large enough to accommodate a company of space marines. Honor guards waited in perfect formation, 50 blood angels in ceremonial armor, their crimson plate polished to mirror brightness, bolters held at parade rest. At their center stood a figure that commanded attention through sheer presence, Chapter Master Dante. Even by Space Marine standards, he was ancient, over 1,100 years of service, his face hidden behind the golden death mask of Sanguinius, his ornate artificer armor bearing honors from campaigns that predated most planetary governments. He stood like a living relic, the weight of centuries visible in every measured movement. The Thunderhawk's assault ramp lowered. Mephiston descended first, followed by Brother Chaplain Thaddeus and the veterans who had fought on Sangreal Proxima. Alucard walked out last, conspicuously informal among the armored giants, his red coat billowing in Baal's toxic wind. 50 bolters tracked his movement with mechanical precision, Chapter. Master Dante's voice carried across the platform, amplified by his armor's vox speakers, resonant with authority accumulated over millennia. "You are the creature my brothers have reported, the vampire who fell through the warp, the abomination who fought beside the sons of Sanguinius." "Guilty on all counts," Alucard replied, sweeping into a theatrical bow. "Alucard, formerly of the Hellsing organization, currently displaced across realities and thoroughly confused about your Imperium's interior decoration philosophy. Seriously, does everything have to be a cathedral? Can't you just have a nice simple fortress occasionally?" Several blood angels tensed. Dante raised one armored hand, and they relaxed fractionally. "Irreverence in the face of the chapter master," Dante said. "Either supreme confidence or profound stupidity. Lord Mephiston, your assessment?" Mephiston stepped forward. "The vampire is powerful, my lord, capable of regeneration from catastrophic damage, possessing strength sufficient to kill an orc war boss in close combat, and commanding approximately 3 million souls as weapons. He claims no allegiance to chaos, shows no signs of warp corruption, and fought effectively alongside our brothers against Xenos threats. And you trust this creature?" "I trust that he is what he claims, a weapon seeking worthy death. Whether that makes him trustworthy or merely predictable is still under evaluation." Dante was silent for a long moment, his masked face impossible to read. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, less formal, more contemplative. 1,100 years I have served the chapter. In that time I have witnessed miracles and damnations. I have seen brothers fall to the black rage and rise as death company. I have watched the red thirst claim warriors I loved as sons. And through it all, I have wondered. He descended from the honor guard's formation, approaching Alucard directly until they stood 5 meters apart, chapter master and vampire, facing each other on sacred ground. I have wondered what it means to be cursed, whether our affliction is punishment or test, whether the Emperor watches our suffering with compassion or indifference, whether there is purpose in our bloodlust or merely cosmic cruelty. Dante's golden mask reflected the dying light of Baal's sun. And now a creature appears who embraces what we fear most, who claims that acceptance of monstrosity brings strength rather than damnation. Tell me, vampire, is our resistance to the curse noble or simply cowardice? The platform fell absolutely silent. Even the toxic wind seemed to pause. This was not a question chapter masters asked aloud. This was the doubt that gnawed at every blood angel in their darkest moments. Alucard met Dante's masked gaze without flinching. You want honesty? Real honesty, not the comfortable lies warriors tell themselves. I have lived 11 centuries. I can bear truth. Then here it is. Your curse is what you are, not what you suffer, not what you endure, what you are. Alucard's voice lost its theatrical edge, becoming something rawer, more genuine. You were built from your primarch's genetic material. His blood flows in your veins. His strengths became your strengths, and his weaknesses became yours. The red thirst, the black rage, those aren't external afflictions. They're part of Sanguinius's legacy, passed down through every generation. Heresy, Brother Chaplain Thaddeus began. Let him finish, Dante commanded. Alucard continued. You fight the curse because you think that makes you noble. That resistance proves you're more than beasts. But all you're doing is fighting yourselves, your own nature. And that kind of war can only end one way, with exhaustion, surrender, or death. He gestured at the fortress monastery. How many brothers have fallen to the black rage? Hundreds? Thousands? How many Death Company warriors have you sent to die because they couldn't resist anymore? 3,417, Dante said quietly. In my tenure as chapter master, 3,417 brothers lost to the rage. And you see each one as a failure, a weakness, a brother who couldn't maintain discipline. Alucard stepped closer. But what if they weren't failures? What if they were just honest about what all of you are? Predators wearing the masks of angels, pretending the hunger isn't real? We are more than hunger! Thaddeus's voice was sharp with anger. We are the Emperor's chosen. We fight for humanity's survival. Our curse does not define us. No, Alucard agreed. It doesn't define you. But denying it doesn't make it go away either. It just makes you exhausted. He looked at Dante. You asked if your resistance was noble or cowardice. The answer is neither. It's wasteful. You spend so much energy fighting what you are that you have less left to fight what you're meant to fight, the actual enemies of humanity. Mephiston had been observing this exchange with his psychic senses fully active, reading the emotional resonance from everyone present. What he found was disturbing. Agreement. Not voiced, not acknowledged, but present in dozens of blood angels who stood guard, warriors who had felt the red thirst rise, who had resisted with prayer and discipline, who secretly wondered if acceptance would be easier. You propose we surrender to the curse, Dante said, become the monsters we fear. I propose you accept the curse and use it as a weapon instead of treating it as an enemy. Alucard's tone was earnest now, persuasive. I drink blood. I revel in slaughter. I am every nightmare humanity ever had about vampires. And I've spent 5 centuries using that nature in service to protecting humanity. The Hellsing organization didn't try to cure me. They aimed me at targets and let me be what I am. Your chapter could do the same. Weaponize the red thirst, Mephiston said thoughtfully. Channel the black rage rather than suppress it. Use the curse as tactical advantage rather than strategic liability. Madness, Thaddeus said. If we embrace the bloodlust, we become no better than the traitors who fell to Khorne. We become world eaters, lost to mindless slaughter. The world eaters had no discipline, Alucard countered. No structure, no master to serve. They surrendered to rage without purpose. What I'm suggesting is different. Acknowledge the hunger, accept it, but maintain control through loyalty, through service, through choosing when and where to unleash what you are. He gestured at the assembled blood angels. Every one of your brothers here knows the red thirst intimately. They feel it every time they draw blood in combat. They taste it when enemies die before them. They dream of it when they sleep in their meditation cells. And they spend every waking moment fighting it, denying it, praying for the Emperor's salvation from their own nature. That's what makes us angels instead of monsters, a voice said from the honor guard, Captain Balin, commander of the 2nd Company. The discipline to resist. And when you finally can't resist anymore, Alucard asked, when a brother falls to the black rage despite all his prayer and discipline, you paint his armor black and send him to die. You make his curse his execution. Tell me, is that mercy or murder? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Chapter Master Dante was absolutely still, and through his psychic connection, Mephiston could feel the storm of conflict raging behind that golden mask. 1,100 years of service, 1,100 years of sending brothers to the death company bound, 1,100 years of watching warriors fall to a curse they couldn't prevent or cure. You offer no solution, Dante said finally. Only philosophy. Words do not cure genetic affliction. No, Alucard agreed. But acceptance might make it bearable, and proper channeling might make it useful. He spread his hands. I'm not saying I have all the answers, Chapter Master. I'm just a vampire who learned to live with what he is. But I've seen your brothers in combat. I've watched them fight the thirst and the rage simultaneously, and I've wondered, how much more effective would they be if they stopped fighting themselves? A vox chime interrupted the conversation. A serf approached Dante, bowing low, whispering urgently. The chapter master listened, then nodded. We will continue this discussion later, Dante announced. Reports from the Librarius indicate a warp anomaly forming in the Baal system. Long-range augurs detect multiple ships emerging from the immaterium, bearing the signs of chaos corruption. His voice hardened with the certainty of command. The Red Corsairs come to raid. All companies to battle stations. The defense of Baal begins now. The Blood Angels moved with practiced efficiency, century-long training overriding philosophical uncertainty. The honor guard dispersed to their assigned positions. Captains voxed orders to their companies. The fortress monastery's defensive batteries began tracking trajectories, calculating firing solutions. Alucard stood in the center of controlled chaos, watching warriors prepare for war with grim determination. Then he felt it. A psychic presence emerging from the warp, multiple signatures twisted by chaos exposure, radiating the particular brand of hatred that defined traitors who had rejected the Emperor millennia ago. Mephiston appeared beside him. Red Corsairs, Chaos Space Marines who raid the Imperium for supplies and slaves. They're led by Huron Blackheart, the tyrant of Badab, and they're exceptionally dangerous. Chaos, Alucard repeated, tasting the word. This is what you mentioned before. Your gods of corruption, the beings who tempt warriors into betrayal and mutation. Yes. And they're coming here to Baal for reasons we don't yet understand. This could be a simple raid. Mephiston's psychic senses were straining, reading the approaching fleet. Or it could be something worse. The Red Corsairs rarely attack Space Marine homeworlds directly. The cost is too high. Unless they know something is here worth the cost, Alucard finished. His smile returned, sharp, anticipating violence. And suddenly I'm very popular. 3 guesses what they might want. You believe they're coming for you? I fell through the warp, librarian. Even if I'm not tainted by chaos, the event itself probably registered across half the galaxy. A dimensional breach of that magnitude? I'd bet your chaos gods noticed. And if they noticed, they'll want to either recruit me or eliminate me. Alucard's eyes blazed crimson. Which means this is going to be interesting. Chapter Master Dante's voice cut through the voxnet, reaching every blood angel on Baal and in orbit. Sons of Sanguinius, the traitors come to our sacred world. They seek to despoil what we hold dear. We will show them the price of such arrogance. A pause, then words that resonated with centuries of conviction. For the Emperor and the great angel, no mercy, no retreat, no surrender. For the Emperor and Sanguinius! The response echoed across the fortress monastery, from every tower and every hall. And in the midst of it all, Alucard drew his pistols and laughed. The red corsairs tore into real space like a wound opening in flesh. 12 vessels materialized from the warp. Corrupted strike cruisers bearing the scars of 10,000 years' rebellion, their hulls festooned with spikes and trophies, bleeding reality around them like oil on water. At their center, the Skull-Taker, Huron Blackheart's flagship, emerged wreathed in unholy fire, its auger arrays already scanning Baal's surface with predatory intensity. Aboard the blade of Sanguinius, still in high orbit, Brother Sergeant Erasmus monitored the tactical display with mounting concern. 12 ships, 6 cruiser class, multiple escorts, full Chaos Warband strength. He looked at Captain Balin, who commanded the orbital defense. They're committing significant resources to this raid. They're not raiding, Captain Balin said grimly. Look at the formation. Boarding torpedoes already loaded. Drop pods prepared for immediate launch. They're coming straight for the fortress monastery. He activated the fleet-wide Vox. All ships, engage at maximum range. Make them pay for every meter of void they cross. The Blood Angels' fleet opened fire. Lance batteries stabbed through space with coherent light. Macro cannons launched building-sized shells, and torpedo spreads raced toward the Chaos vessels with deadly intent. The Void battle began with the methodical brutality of Void warfare, ships maneuvering for advantage while trading fire measured in megatons. On Baal's surface, Chapter Master Dante stood in the Fortress Monastery's strategium, watching hololithic projections track the battle overhead. Around him, veteran sergeants and company captains coordinated defensive preparations with centuries of accumulated expertise. Alucard stood to one side, observing but not interfering. Mephiston had positioned himself nearby, equal parts escort and guard, ready to intervene if the vampire proved problematic. They're targeting specific landing zones, Lord Mephiston observed, his psychic senses reading the Chaos Fleet's intent through the chaotic resonance of the warp. Not random assault vectors, they have intelligence about the Fortress Monastery's layout. This isn't opportunistic, it's planned. The question is what they're planning to take, Dante said. His ancient voice carried layers of exhaustion that 1,100 years of warfare had carved into his soul. Baal holds gene seed repositories, the Red Grail itself. Relics dating back to the Great Crusade. Any of those would justify this level of assault. Or they're here for me, Alucard said casually. Let's not pretend the timing is coincidental. I fall through your warp 3 days ago and suddenly chaos forces appear at your doorstep? They want the anomaly examined, either recruited or eliminated. You have an inflated sense of your own importance, Thaddeus said coldly. I have a realistic sense of how immortals think, Chaplain. Gods, monsters, vampires, we all operate on similar principles. When something new appears, something that doesn't fit established patterns, we investigate, personally if possible, through proxies if necessary. Alucard adjusted his hat. Your chaos gods probably can't reach me directly. I'm not vulnerable to corruption because I made my devil's bargain centuries before your gods were born. But they can send servants to test me. to see if I'm a threat or an opportunity. A massive explosion rocked the strategium, distant but powerful enough to shake the fortress monastery's foundations. The hololithic display updated. A red Corsair's cruiser had broken through the orbital blockade, crashed through Baal's atmosphere in a controlled descent, and deployed its entire complement of Chaos Space Marines directly onto the surface. 300 traitors, Captain Balin reported. Strike Force Alpha is moving to intercept. Requesting authorization for... Denied, Dante interrupted. Let them come to us. The fortress monastery's defenses are strongest here. We'll grind them down in siege warfare, make them pay in blood for every corridor. He turned to face Alucard fully. Can you fight Chaos Space Marines, Vampire? They're not orcs. They're our fallen brothers, post-human warriors with millennia of experience, enhanced by warp corruption, immune to fear or mercy. I've fought enhanced soldiers before, Alucard replied. Nazi vampires created through experimental surgery and occult rituals. Artificial immortals with regeneration and superhuman strength. This should be comparable. The traitors will try to corrupt you, Mephiston warned. Chaos whispers promises of power, of freedom from restraint, of the joy of surrendering to your darkest impulses. Every word they speak will be laced with temptation. Alucard's smile was sharp. Librarian, I am my darkest impulses given form. I've spent 500 years as a monster. What could chaos possibly offer me that I haven't already experienced? More bloodshed. I have that. Freedom from morality? Already there. Immortality? Check. Power? I punched through a war boss's chest armor with my bare hand. He shook his head. Your chaos gods have nothing I want except possibly a worthy death. And somehow I doubt they're offering that. Arrogance, Thaddeus said. Experience, Alucard corrected. There's a difference. The fortress monastery's defense guns opened fire. Massive anti-orbital cannons that could crack battleships, now aimed at ground targets. The concussive force rattled through the ancient stone, and on the hololithic display, red icons representing chaos forces began winking out as artillery strikes found their marks. But the red Corsairs kept coming. They advanced through the radioactive wastes in disciplined formations, protected by corrupted armor and warp-spawned force fields that turned Baal's toxic atmosphere into mere inconvenience. Leading them was a figure that registered even on the strategium's auspex, a massive presence wrapped in Terminator armor painted in blasphemous colors, crowned with a halo of writhing mechanical tentacles. Huron Blackheart himself, Dante said quietly. The tyrant of Badab. He wouldn't come personally unless the prize was worth his attention. Flattering, Alucard murmured. A warlord who commands 12 warships thinks I'm worth the trip. The outer defenses engaged. Automated gun emplacements tracked the advancing Chaos Marines with machine precision, unleashing storms of heavy bolter fire that would have shredded Imperial Guard regiments. The Red Corsairs weathered it with contemptuous ease. Their corrupted armor absorbed hits that would kill baseline humans, and those who fell were simply trampled by their advancing brothers. They'll breach the outer walls within 20 minutes, Captain Balin calculated. Recommend deploying tactical squads to... An explosion tore through the eastern wall, not from artillery or bombardment, but from within, as if reality itself had rejected the stone's right to exist. Through the breach poured red Corsairs, already inside the fortress monastery, bypassing every defense through methods that made Mephiston's psychic senses scream warnings. Sorcery, the chief librarian hissed. They've teleported strike teams directly into our halls, warp gates or ritual summoning. The ruinous powers are actively aiding this assault. All companies, repel borders! Dante's command cut through the chaos. This is no longer siege defense. This is room-to-room extermination. Show these traitors why Baal has never fallen. The Blood Angels responded with the fury of defenders protecting sacred ground. Tactical squads rushed toward breach points, bolters already firing. Assault Marines activated jump packs, flying through the fortress monastery's vast halls to intercept. Terminators, the chapter's most veteran warriors in the heaviest armor, formed killing corridors where traitors would die in withering crossfire. Alucard walked toward the nearest breach point with Mephiston and Thaddeus flanking him. The sounds of combat echoed through stone corridors that had stood for 10 millennia. Bolter fire, chainsaw screams, the wet crunch of ceramite punching through flesh. They found the first combat zone in the Hall of Remembrance, a vast chamber lined with statues of fallen heroes, each one a blood angel who had died with exceptional honor. Red corsairs were systematically desecrating them, toppling marble figures, defacing inscriptions, painting chaos sigils over sacred names. Brother Sergeant Erasmus and his squad were already engaged, fighting desperately against Chaos Marines who matched them in skill and exceeded them in cruelty. The traitors laughed as they killed, their armor covered in obscene trophies, their weapons modified with warp-touched enhancements that made every wound fester and corrupt. "For Sanguinius!" Erasmus bellowed, his chainsword carving through a red corsair's midsection. The traitor staggered but didn't fall. Laughing even as his entrails spilled out, firing his bolter until Erasmus put 3 rounds through his faceplate. More red corsairs poured through the breach. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had fought for 10,000 years, who had survived the long war through skill and savage determination. One of them, a champion marked with the 8-pointed star of Chaos Undivided, locked eyes with Alucard across the hall. "You," the champion said, his voice distorted by Vox corruption and mutation. "The anomaly, the thing that fell from outside. We have come for you, creature, to test you, to break you, to see if you're worthy of the gods' attention or merely another false prophet claiming power." "I claim nothing," Alucard replied, drawing his pistols. "I just am." "There's a difference," the champion laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Then let us see what you are when faced with the chosen of the dark gods." He charged, and 5 red corsairs moved with him in perfect coordination. They had fought together for centuries, their tactics honed through countless battles. They moved to flank, to overwhelm, to execute Alucard with the efficiency of veteran killers. Alucard shot the champion through the heart before he'd closed half the distance. The Jackal's massive round punched through corrupted ceramite, through the Chaos Marine's primary heart, and detonated inside his chest cavity. The champion staggered, looked down at the fist-sized hole and kept coming, because Chaos Space Marines had redundant organs and superhuman resilience that let them fight through wounds that would kill anything else. Alucard shot him again, through the head this time. The champion's skull exploded in a spray of brain matter and bone fragments laced with warp taint. His body collapsed mid-stride, finally accepting death. The other 4 red corsairs opened fire simultaneously. Bolter rounds tore into Alucard from multiple angles: chest, legs, shoulder, abdomen. Each hit detonated, turning flesh to pulp, shredding his body with explosive force. Within 2 seconds, Alucard had been reduced to a barely recognizable mass of torn meat held together by his coat. The red corsairs ceased fire, already moving to new targets. Alucard was classified as eliminated. Then he stood up. The wounds closed, flesh knitted together with supernatural speed, bones snapping back into alignment, organs regenerating from catastrophic damage. Within 5 seconds he was whole again, pristine, his coat already repairing itself through whatever enchantment bound it to his existence. "My turn," Alucard said pleasantly. He moved like death given form. The Kasul fired 4 times in rapid succession. 4 red corsairs, 4 perfect headshots, 4 bodies falling before they could register the threat. The vampire was among them before they hit the ground, both pistols holstered, fighting with bare hands that struck like pile drivers. A red corsair swung a chainsword at his neck. Alucard caught the blade mid-swing, yanked it from the traitor's grip, and drove it through its former owner's eye lens. Another fired point blank into his back. Alucard turned, grabbed the bolter's barrel, crushed it with one hand until the weapon ruptured, then drove his other hand through the Chaos Marine's chest and pulled out his secondary heart. "You're modified humans," Alucard said conversationally, examining the still beating heart before dropping it. "Enhanced, corrupted, rebuilt through surgery and dark pacts. But you're still fundamentally biological, still vulnerable to having vital organs removed. Still mortal, for all your posturing about serving eternal gods." More red corsairs poured into the Hall of Remembrance, dozens of them, recognizing that this target required overwhelming force. They formed firing lines, calculating fields of fire, preparing to reduce the vampire to atoms through concentrated bolter volleys. Alucard's eyes changed. The crimson faded to black, shot through with stars. His shadow expanded, covering 50 meters of stone floor. And from that darkness, his familiars began to emerge. Spectral soldiers from World War II, medieval knights, victims spanning 5 centuries, all rising with weapons drawn and eyes burning with borrowed life. "Restraint Level 2 release." Alucard's voice echoed with the resonance of millions. "Deploying familiars. Combat authorization. Unlimited." The spectral army charged. They crashed into the red corsairs like a tide of vengeful ghosts, and where they touched corrupted ceramite, the armor began to corrode. Not physically rusting, but metaphysically rejecting its right to exist, as if the accumulated weight of 3 million deaths was declaring that these traitors had lived long enough. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus watched in horrified fascination. "This is sorcery. This is warp manipulation. How is it different from what the traitors use?" "It's not the warp," Mephiston said, his psychic senses reading the phenomenon with perfect clarity. "It's something older, predating your chaos, predating even the Emperor's unification. Raw metaphysical authority, death itself given tactical form." A red corsair sorcerer stepped forward, staff crackling with warp fire, ready to banish these spirits back to whatever hell had spawned them. He chanted in languages that predated human civilization, drawing power from the ruinous powers, preparing to unleash devastation. Alucard looked at him, just looked, and the sorcerer's chanting died in his throat. "You think you understand darkness?" Alucard's voice was quiet now, intimate, carrying across the hall despite the chaos. "You think your gods have shown you the depths of horror? Child, I am the darkness your gods fear. I am the thing that existed before they were born, and I'll exist after they're forgotten. Your warp corruption is an infection. Mine is fundamental nature. There's a hierarchy here, sorcerer, and you're so far beneath me, it's almost pitiful." The sorcerer's staff exploded. Not from any attack, it simply rejected its wielder's worthiness, the warp energies turning inward, consuming him from within. He screamed as his body unraveled, pulled into the immaterium he'd served so faithfully, leaving only scorched armor behind. The remaining red corsairs hesitated. These were warriors who had fought for 10,000 years, who had survived the siege of Terra, the scouring, the long war, who feared nothing because they'd seen everything. They were afraid now. "Fall back," one veteran shouted. "Regroup at—" Alucard was there, both pistols drawn, firing with mechanical precision. Red corsairs fell like wheat before a scythe, each shot perfect, each death instant, no wasted ammunition or movement. And behind him, his familiars swarmed over the stragglers, dragging them down into shadows that swallowed screams whole. Brother Sergeant Erasmus and his squad stood frozen, watching the vampire systematically annihilate an enemy that had been slaughtering them moments before. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. This creature fought with them, but not like them. It didn't follow imperial doctrine or space marine tactics. It simply killed with the efficiency of something that had perfected murder over centuries. Within 3 minutes, the Hall of Remembrance was silent except for the groaning of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. 50 red corsairs had entered, none left alive. Alucard recalled his familiars with a gesture, the spectral army flowing back into his shadow like water down a drain. His eyes returned to their normal crimson. He looked around the desecrated hall at the toppled statues and defaced inscriptions, and his expression was almost apologetic. "Sorry about your heroes," he said to no one in particular. "I know what it's like when sacred things get destroyed." Chapter Master Dante's voice came through the vox, addressing all forces. "The vampire has proven his worth in blood. All blood angels. He fights with us. Anyone who harms him answers to me personally." It was the closest thing to official sanction Alucard was likely to receive. The Hall of Heroes became a crucible where ideology, faith, and raw violence collided with apocalyptic force. Huron Blackheart was a monument to chaos's corrupting touch. 4 meters of Terminator armor fused with demonic machinery, his right side a mass of writhing mechanical tentacles that moved with predatory intelligence, his left arm ending in a power claw that crackled with stolen energy from 1,000 dead loyalists. He had survived 10,000 years through cunning, brutality, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The tyrant of Badab had broken entire chapters, razed worlds, and carved his legend into imperial history with blood and betrayal. Alucard shot him in the face. The Jackal's massive round struck Huron's helmet dead center, the blessed silver and mercury core detonating with enough force to crack ceramite. The Chaos Lord's head snapped backward, his vox speakers erupting with feedback static. For a moment, just a moment, there was silence as everyone processed what had just happened. Then Huron laughed. "Finally! Something with spine!" His mechanical tentacles lashed forward, moving faster than objects that size should move, wrapping around Alucard before he could dodge. They constricted with bone-crushing force, servo motors whining as they applied pressure sufficient to compress a battle tank. "Let's see how well you regenerate from this, vampire!" Alucard's ribs shattered, his spine cracked. Blood, black as oil, sprayed from his mouth as internal organs ruptured under the hydraulic pressure. The tentacles squeezed tighter, and his body began to literally compress, bones splintering, flesh pulping. He phased. One moment Alucard was solid, being crushed to paste. The next he was translucent, insubstantial, the tentacles passing through him like he was smoke. He reformed 3 meters away, his body already healing, bones snapping back into place with audible cracks. "Interesting trick," Huron said approvingly. "Warp-based teleportation? No, something different. You're not moving through the immaterium. You're rejecting physicality itself, temporarily becoming concept rather than matter." His eye lenses blazed with unholy light. "The gods were right to be curious about you." Around them, the battle raged with devastating intensity. Chapter Master Dante fought with the precision of 1,100 years' experience, his ancient power sword, the Axe Mortalis, carving chunks from Huron's armor despite its corruption. The sanguinary guard clashed with Chaos Terminators in a whirlwind of gold and black, mastercrafted weapons meeting corrupted blades in showers of sparks and blood. And through it all, the Death Company arrived. They crashed into the Hall of Heroes like a black tide, 37 warriors lost to the Black Rage but given purpose by Alucard's words. They fell upon the Chaos forces with mindless fury, chainzords screaming, bolt pistols firing at point-blank range, fighting with a ferocity that made even hardened red corsairs hesitate. Brother Moriar led them, his broken voice screaming accusations at Horus, dead for 10 millennia but alive in his mind, as he carved through traitor marines with brutal efficiency. "Your Death Company," Huron observed. dodging a strike from Dante while simultaneously backhanding a sanguinary guard hard enough to dent golden ceramite. The ones you lock away because you're too cowardly to embrace what they represent. Too afraid to admit that your curse is also your greatest strength. They are our brothers, Dante snarled, pressing his attack. Not weapons to be unleashed without care. They're weapons you're too squeamish to properly deploy. Huron's power claw caught Dante's sword mid-swing, the energy fields screaming as they ground against each other. The gods see that weakness, old man. That's why you're dying slowly instead of conquering. You fight your own nature instead of embracing it. Alucard emptied both pistols into Huron's back. 26 rounds of blessed silver and explosive mercury cores, each one detonating inside the Chaos Lord's armor. Huron staggered, servo motors sparking, armor plates cracking. He spun, releasing Dante, his attention now fully on the vampire. You fight without honor, Huron said, shooting an engaged opponent from behind, exploiting distraction, using every dirty trick available. I'm a vampire, not a knight, Alucard replied, reloading with supernatural speed. Honor is what warriors with weaknesses use to feel better about losing. I'm here to kill you, not impress you. Then try harder, Huron charged, his bulk shaking the floor, mechanical tentacles spreading wide to prevent Alucard from dodging. His power claw swept in a horizontal arc designed to bisect the vampire at the waist. Alucard didn't dodge. He caught the power claw. His bare hand closed around energized blades that could shear through tank armor, and he stopped Huron's charge cold. Electricity arced through his body, charring flesh, cooking muscle, turning bone to ash. The pain would have killed a baseline human instantly. Alucard's smile widened. My turn. His free hand punched forward, fingers extended like a spear, and struck Huron's chest plate with enough force to create a shockwave. The corrupted ceramite held, barely, but the impact drove Huron backward, his Terminator armor's servos straining to maintain balance. Alucard followed, both hands now gripping the power claw, and with a sound like tearing metal, he twisted. The power claw's energy field flickered and died as internal mechanisms shattered. Huron roared in fury and pain, his mechanical tentacles lashing forward to impale Alucard from multiple angles. They struck true. 5 tentacles punching through the vampire's torso, emerging from his back in sprays of black blood. Alucard looked down at the tentacles skewering him, then back up at Huron. You're going to need more than that. His shadows erupted. Not the controlled manifestation of familiars from before, but raw darkness boiling out from his body like a living thing. It wrapped around Huron's tentacles, spreading up toward their source, and where it touched corrupted metal, the machinery began to age. Rust spread like infection, joints seized. The demonic intelligence inhabiting the tentacles shrieked, a sound heard psychically rather than physically, as something older and more primal than chaos itself declared their existence invalid. What are you? Huron demanded, genuine confusion entering his voice for the first time. This isn't warpcraft. This isn't any power the gods recognize. What are you? Death, Alucard said simply. Not the concept, not a metaphor. Actual literal death given form and purpose 500 years ago when a man named Bl00d chose damnation over defeat. I am what happens when mortality gets rejected so completely that reality bends to accommodate the contradiction. His eyes blazed crimson. Your chaos gods are powerful, tyrant, but they're young compared to what I represent. Death predates them. Death will outlast them. And death is very unimpressed by your mutations. He yanked himself free of the tentacles, his torso healing instantly, and delivered a palm strike to Huron's chest that cracked armor plates and drove the Chaos Lord backward 10 meters. Huron crashed through a marble pillar, dust and debris raining down, his armor's systems struggling to compensate for catastrophic damage. Mephiston, fighting nearby against a chaos sorcerer, felt his psychic senses scream warnings. What Alucard was doing wasn't sorcery or warp manipulation. It was something his mind struggled to categorize. Raw metaphysical authority. The power to declare, "I am death, and you are mortal, therefore you end," and have reality enforce that declaration. It was terrifying in its simplicity. Huron rose from the rubble, his armor sparking, half his tentacles hanging limp and useless. For the first time in millennia, the tyrant of Bl00d experienced something approaching doubt. This creature, this vampire, wasn't following the rules, wasn't using power sources the gods understood, wasn't vulnerable to corruption because it had already embraced something darker than chaos itself. "The gods will want you even more after this," Huron said, his voice carrying new respect. "You're a wild card, a piece that doesn't fit the great game, that makes you either an asset beyond price or a threat that must be eliminated." "Tell your gods," Alucard said, walking forward slowly, both pistols drawn again, "that I'm not interested in playing their games. I serve who I choose to serve. I fight when I choose to fight. And right now, I'm choosing to demonstrate why ancient vampires don't fear newborn gods." He fired. Both pistols, simultaneously, aimed at Huron's damaged chest plate. The rounds struck the same point, the weakest spot in the armor, cracked by previous impacts, and punched through. They detonated inside Huron's chest cavity, and even Terminator armor couldn't protect him from explosive rounds detonating against his primary organs. Huron staggered, black blood leaking from the wound, his corruption actually working against him as the blessed silver in Alucard's ammunition reacted violently with chaos-tainted flesh. His remaining tentacles flailed wildly, striking at everything within reach, friend and foe alike. Chapter Master Dante seized the moment. The axe mortalis descended in a perfect executioner's stroke, carving through Huron's helmet, splitting his mutated skull from crown to jaw. The Chaos Lord's body locked up, systems failing, demonic essence bleeding away as the physical anchor holding it couldn't maintain cohesion. "For Sanguinius," Dante said quietly, withdrawing his blade. "And for every brother you've slain, traitor." Huron Blackheart collapsed, his massive Terminator armor hitting the floor with a sound like thunder. He wasn't dead. Chaos Lords were notoriously difficult to kill permanently, but he was defeated, his body broken, his immediate threat neutralized. The remaining Red Corsairs saw their lord fall and broke. Some attempted to fight their way out, only to be cut down by the combined might of Blood Angels and Death Company warriors. Others tried to flee through warp gates, only to have Mephiston collapse the portals before they could escape, stranding them in a fortress full of enraged space marines. Within 5 minutes, the Hall of Heroes was secure. The Red Corsairs' assault had failed catastrophically, their lord defeated, their forces scattered, their objective denied. Alucard stood amid the carnage, reloading his pistols one more time, though there were no enemies left to shoot. Around him, Blood Angels attended to their wounded, said prayers over their fallen, and began the grim work of cataloging the damage. The Death Company, their purpose fulfilled, stood in a loose formation, their black rage still present but quieted by exhaustion. Chapter Master Dante approached Alucard slowly, his ancient armor scored and damaged, his movements carrying the weight of yet another battle survived at terrible cost. He stopped 3 meters away, removed his golden death mask, and revealed a face that had lived far too long, scarred, weary, but still carrying the ghost of nobility that had defined the Blood Angels since their founding. "You fought well, vampire," Dante said. His voice was quiet, meant only for Alucard, despite the open Vox channel. "You protected our brothers, turned back a chaos assault that should have overwhelmed us, gave the Death Company purpose when we would have simply sent them to die. You've earned a debt from the Blood Angels that will not be forgotten." "I didn't do it for debts," Alucard replied. "I did it because He paused, searching for words. Because for the first time in centuries, I found warriors who might actually understand what I am. Monsters fighting for something beyond themselves. Predators using their nature as a weapon instead of treating it as a curse to overcome. You're flawed, hypocritical, and drowning in your own dogma. But you're also honest about what you are when you stop lying to yourselves. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then, "What will you do now, Alucard of the Hellsing organization? You're trapped in a universe not your own. You have no master to serve, no organization to command you, no purpose beyond wandering until something finally kills you. The Imperium is vast, but it's not welcoming to anomalies." "I don't know," Alucard admitted. "In my universe I had Integra. I had orders. I had a role. The monster on a leash, aimed at other monsters, given purpose through service. Here," he gestured at the ruined hall, at the blood angels, at Baal's toxic sky visible through shattered windows. "Here, I'm just a weapon without a wielder, a story without an ending, a death that keeps getting postponed." Mephiston stepped forward, having completed his psychic sweep for remaining threats. "The vampire has proven himself valuable, Chapter Master. His abilities complement our own, and his perspective may prove useful in addressing the curse that plagues us. I propose we offer him sanctuary on Baal. Not as a brother, he can never be that, but as an auxiliary. A specialist asset deployed when conventional forces prove insufficient." "You would make him our pet monster?" Thaddeus's voice carried disapproval. "Legitimize his existence through formal association with the chapter?" "I would give him what he craves," Mephiston replied. "Purpose, direction, worthy opponents. Everything he had in his own universe translated to ours. In exchange, we gain a weapon of considerable power who fights without the red thirst, without the black rage, without the limitations that plague our brothers. It's pragmatic. The Imperium specializes in pragmatism when survival demands it." Dante looked at Alucard, really looked at him, reading the vampire the way only someone who'd lived 1100 years could, seeing past the theatrical menace and casual violence to the profound loneliness underneath. Here was a creature who'd lived 500 years seeking a worthy death, serving masters to give that death meaning, and now finding himself adrift in a universe that didn't understand what he was. "I cannot offer you a place among the blood angels," Dante said finally. "Our gene seed is sacred, our brotherhood earned through trials you haven't undergone. But I can offer you purpose. Service to the chapter in exchange for sanctuary on Baal. You would fight when we fight, hunt when we hunt. And in exchange, we would provide you with exactly what you seek. Endless war against enemies worthy of your abilities, battles that might finally grant you the death you crave, and warriors who understand what it means to be cursed with monstrous nature." "Servitude again," Alucard said, but his tone lacked bitterness. "Always servitude, always answering to someone else's authority." "Because you understand the alternative," Dante replied. "Freedom without purpose is torture for creatures like us. Warriors without wars are just weapons rusting in forgotten armories. You don't want freedom, vampire. You want meaning, direction. Someone strong enough to aim you at worthy opponents and tell you that your violence serves something beyond mere slaughter." Alucard was silent, genuinely considering the offer. Around them, blood angels continued their post-battle protocols, but every nearby warrior was listening, waiting to hear what the vampire would decide. "There are conditions," Alucard said finally. "I'm not one of your servitors. I'm not mindless. I want actual autonomy, the right to refuse orders that violate what I am, the freedom to fight how I choose, recognition that I'm cooperating rather than being commanded." "Agreed," Dante said. "Within reason. Orders that serve the chapter's strategic goals will be given, but tactical execution remains your discretion." And the Death Company, Alucard continued. I want access to them, not to experiment on or corrupt, but to help. To see if what worked today, giving them purpose, acknowledging their rage rather than suppressing it, can be replicated, can be formalized. Your brothers deserve better than black armor and suicide charges. Thaddeus looked ready to object, but Dante raised a hand, silencing him. That is a significant request. The Death Company are sacred, our most tragic brothers. Allowing an outsider access to them is pragmatic, Mephiston interjected. If the vampire can replicate what he did today, giving them temporary lucidity, channeling their rage toward meaningful targets, then we would be fools to refuse. We lose dozens of brothers to the Black Rage every year. If even a fraction could be recovered, or their final service made more meaningful. The chaplaincy would need to supervise, Dante said. Brother Chaplain Thaddeus will monitor all interactions. Any sign of corruption, any indication that you're worsening their condition rather than helping, and the arrangement ends immediately. Fair enough, Alucard agreed. One more condition. When I finally find my death, when an opponent proves strong enough to end me permanently, you let it happen. No desperate rescues, no attempting to resurrect me through your technology or sorcery. I've earned that death over 5 centuries. When it comes, I want it honored. Dante extended his hand, a gesture of agreement that transcended the millennia between them. When death comes for you honestly, vampire, we will bear witness and ensure your end is worthy of the warrior you've proven yourself to be. This I swear, by the memory of Sanguinius himself. Alucard took the offered hand, his pale fingers closing around Dante's armored gauntlet. Then I accept your service, chapter master of the Blood Angels. Aim me at your enemies. Give me wars worth fighting, and we'll see if this universe finally contains something capable of ending the no-life king. Thunder rumbled across Baal's toxic sky. Not weather, but the sound of red corsair ships fleeing the system in disarray, their assault broken, their lord defeated. The Blood Angels had held. The fortress monastery stood secure. And something new had been born. An alliance between angels and vampire, united by the understanding that monsters could serve noble causes without pretending they weren't monsters. Brother Moriar approached slowly, his black rage temporarily quieted by exhaustion. His vox speakers crackled as he forced words through the visions. Vampire helped us, gave purpose. Father would approve? Sanguinius would approve of any path that let his sons serve with honor, Dante said gently. Even paths we never anticipated. Rest now, brother. Your service today was exemplary. The Death Company withdrew under chaplain supervision, still dangerous but no longer mindlessly violent. They had been given something precious, a moment of clarity, a taste of purpose beyond simple destruction. Whether that could be sustained, whether Alucard's methods could be formalized, remained to be seen. But for the first time in millennia, there was hope that the Black Rage might be channeled rather than merely endured. As the sun set over Baal's wasteland, painting the toxic clouds in shades of blood red that seemed somehow appropriate, Alucard stood on the fortress monastery's highest tower and looked out over his new reality, a universe of endless war, gods that walked among mortals, technology that bordered on sorcery. Angels cursed with the same bloodlust that defined him. It wasn't home. It would never be home. But it would do. Behind him, Mephiston approached, his psychic presence announcing his arrival long before his footsteps. Having second thoughts? No, Alucard said. Just wondering how long it'll take before something in this universe proves strong enough to kill me. Your chaos gods? Those tyrannids I've heard whispers about? Ancient machines that killed gods? This universe seems full of apocalyptic threats. It is, Mephiston confirmed. We've been fighting on the brink of extinction for 10,000 years. Every generation thinks it will be the last. Yet we endure. Humanity endures. Not through strength alone, but through the refusal to accept defeat. Sounds exhausting. It is. Mephiston's expression was unreadable. But it's also meaningful. Every battle won is one more day humanity survives. Every enemy defeated is another threat eliminated. We fight knowing we'll probably lose eventually, but determined to make that loss as distant and expensive as possible. Alucard was quiet for a moment. Then, "In my universe, I served because Integra was worthy of service, because she represented something worth protecting, even if I was a monster doing the protecting. What do you represent, librarian? What makes the Blood Angels worth serving?" "We represent the possibility," Mephiston said slowly, "that even cursed things can choose nobility, that warriors drowning in bloodlust can still fight for something beyond themselves, that angels and monsters aren't opposites, just different expressions of the same fundamental nature." He looked at Alucard directly. "You understand that better than most. You've lived it for 500 years. Now you have the chance to share that understanding with an entire chapter who desperately needs to hear it." "No pressure, then?" "None at all," Mephiston said with the ghost of a smile. "Just the fate of 10,000 space marines, the defense of human worlds across the sector, and the question of whether embracing one's monstrous nature can coexist with serving noble purposes. A light afternoon's work for an ancient vampire. Despite everything, despite the violence, the corruption, the sheer grimdark brutality of the 41st Millennium," Alucard laughed, genuine, honest laughter that echoed across Baal's toxic wasteland. "I think," he said finally, "that I'm going to enjoy this universe after all." 3 months after the Red Corsairs' failed assault on Baal, the fortress monastery had returned to its grim routine of eternal vigilance. The damage had been repaired, the fallen honored, and the chapter's gene seed stores secured against future raids. But something fundamental had changed within the Blood Angels, a shift so subtle that only the most observant noticed, yet profound enough to alter centuries of doctrine. In the Tower of Amareo, Brother Chaplain Thaddeus stood before 15 Death Company warriors, their black armor gleaming in the chamber's crimson light. Beside him, wearing his eternal red coat and that insufferable smile, stood Alucard. "Brothers," Thaddeus began, his voice carrying the weight of reluctant acceptance, "today we attempt something heretical by our traditions. We acknowledge the Black Rage not as a curse to suppress, but as a weapon to wield with purpose. The vampire will speak, you will listen, and may the Emperor forgive us if this proves to be folly." Alucard stepped forward, meeting the haunted gazes of warriors trapped between past and present. "You're living in 2 moments simultaneously," he said without preamble. "The now and the moment your primarch died 10,000 years ago. Fighting that division is what drives you mad. But what if you stopped fighting? What if you accepted both timelines as equally real and chose which one to act within?" Brother Casimir, one of the newest fallen, his voice barely human through the Black Rage, "Cannot choose. Father dies, always dying." "Yes," Alucard agreed. "He is. In your mind, Sanguinius falls to Horus's blade over and over, an eternal loop of betrayal and death. But he's also been dead for 10 millennia, his sacrifice complete, his legacy preserved through you. Both truths exist. The question is, which truth serves you better in this moment?" It was heresy. Pure, undiluted heresy by every measure of imperial doctrine. Yet over the following weeks, something remarkable occurred. Death Company warriors, given permission to acknowledge their madness rather than fight it, began displaying moments of lucidity. Brief windows where they could distinguish past from present, where they could channel their rage toward chosen targets rather than everything in reach. The success rate was modest. Perhaps 30% showed improvement. but 30% of the Death Company functioning with partial tactical awareness was 30% more than the chapter had ever achieved through prayer and restraint alone. Lord Mephiston documented everything, his scholarly nature fascinated by the philosophical implications. In his private journals, accessible only to the chapter's highest ranks, he wrote, "The vampire poses a question we've avoided for millennia. What if our curse is not a flaw to overcome, but a feature to utilize? What if Sanguinius's final gift was not nobility despite bloodlust, but nobility expressed through properly channeled bloodlust? The implications are staggering and terrifying." Chapter Master Dante wrestled with the same questions, though his perspective carried the weight of 1100 years. He had seen thousands fall to the Black Rage, had sent them to die with honor when no other option existed. Now, watching Death Company warriors retain fragments of themselves through Alucard's intervention, he felt something he'd thought long dead: hope. And that terrified him more than any chaos assault. Alucard himself adapted to the 41st millennium with the flexibility of someone who'd already lived through 5 centuries of change. He accompanied Blood Angel's strike forces on 17 combat deployments, facing orcs, chaos cultists, tyrannid splinter fleets, and rogue imperial forces. His effectiveness was undeniable. Enemies that would have required sustained campaigns fell before his supernatural abilities in days rather than months. But it was his impact on the chapter's psychology that proved most valuable. Blood Angels who fought beside the vampire witnessed something revolutionary. A creature that embraced its monstrous nature while serving noble purposes. That drank blood without shame while protecting humanity. That reveled in slaughter while maintaining ironclad discipline. It challenged every assumption they'd built their identities upon. In the chapter's Reclusium, the chamber where chaplains counseled brothers struggling with the red thirst, the conversations changed. Where once they counseled suppression and prayer, now they cautiously explored acceptance and channeling. The terminology evolved from resisting the curse to directing the hunger, small shifts in language that reflected seismic shifts in philosophy. Not everyone approved. Traditionalists within the chapter, led by Captain Sendini of the 5th Company, argued that Alucard's presence was corrupting the Blood Angel's soul, that accepting monstrosity, even in service, was the first step toward damnation, that the chapter's nobility came precisely from their refusal to surrender to their nature. The debate raged through the officer corps, a philosophical civil war fought with words rather than weapons. Both sides could cite scripture, precedent, and the will of Sanguinius to support their positions. Both sides genuinely believed they were protecting the chapter's future. Chapter Master Dante let them argue, let the conflict breathe and evolve organically. Because he understood something the younger warriors didn't. The Blood Angels had been having this same argument for 10,000 years, just never openly. Every brother who fell to the Black Rage represented the failure of the suppression philosophy. Every Death Company warrior was a living indictment of their traditional methods. Alucard offered an alternative. Whether it was better or merely different remained to be seen. On the 93rd day after the Red Corsair's assault, Alucard stood once again on the fortress monastery's highest tower, watching Baal's toxic sunset paint the sky in blood. He'd fought 17 battles, drunk the blood of 43 enemies, prevented 3 Death Company warriors from fully succumbing to madness, and killed a chaos sorcerer who'd been terrorizing Imperial worlds for 6 centuries. It wasn't home, but it was purpose. Mephiston joined him, as had become habit. The chief librarian and the vampire had developed something approaching friendship, or at least mutual respect between immortals who understood the burden of living too long. "The Inquisition has taken notice," Mephiston said without preamble. "Reports of a sanctioned vampire fighting alongside the Blood Angels have reached Ordo Hereticus. They're dispatching investigators to determine if we've fallen to corruption." "Will they try to kill me?" "Probably. They're not known for nuanced thinking." "Good." Alucard's smile was sharp. I was getting bored with orcs and cultists, zealous investigators with Imperium backing. That sounds interesting. You're insufferable. I'm immortal. It's a prerequisite. Alucard's tone shifted, becoming more serious. In my universe, I served Integra Hellsing for decades. Watched her grow from a terrified girl into a leader worthy of my loyalty. She gave me purpose, a leash that turned a monster into a weapon. I've been wondering if your chapter master can do the same. Dante is 1100 years old, Mephiston said. He's witnessed the Imperium's slow decay, the chapter's endless struggle against our curse, and maintained faith despite every reason for despair. If anyone can wield you effectively, it's him. But he's tired, Mephiston admitted. More tired than even we realize. He's held the position of chapter master for centuries longer than tradition dictates because no suitable successor has emerged. He fights on because duty demands it, not because he desires it. In many ways, you're more alive than he is, despite your undeath. Alucard considered this. Then perhaps my purpose here isn't just to fight. Perhaps it's to show your chapter master that even ancient things drowning in duty can find new reasons to persist. Arrogant assumption. Earned assumption, Alucard corrected. I've been where he is, immortal, exhausted, waiting for death that won't come, serving because the alternative is meaningless existence. The difference is, I accepted what I am. He's still fighting it, still pretending the curse isn't part of the chapter's fundamental identity. You'll say that to his face? I already have, several times. He listens without agreeing, which is more than most. Alucard looked out over Baal's wastes, where blood angels trained in the toxic atmosphere, where Death Company warriors sparred under careful supervision, where a chapter 10,000 years old continued its eternal struggle. This universe is drowning in apocalyptic threats. Your Imperium is collapsing under its own weight. The Chaos Gods are winning through entropy more than conquest. And here's the Blood Angels, spending energy fighting themselves instead of fighting actual enemies. What would you have us do? Accept what you are. Monsters who serve. Predators who protect. Angels with blood-stained wings who fly anyway because the alternative is letting humanity fall. Alucard's crimson eyes reflected the dying light. Stop treating your curse as something to overcome and start wielding it as the weapon it was always meant to be. You'll be more effective, more honest, and possibly, just possibly, more at peace. Mephiston was quiet for a long moment. You ask us to abandon 10,000 years of tradition, to reject the teachings we've built our identities upon. I ask you to evolve. There's a difference. Alucard turned to face the chief librarian directly. In my universe, the Hellsing organization didn't cure me. They aimed me. You could do the same with your entire chapter. Acknowledge the red thirst, channel the black rage, transform your greatest weakness into your most devastating strength. The Imperium has inquisitors who burn worlds, space marines who know no fear, and guard regiments that die in the billions. Why not have a chapter of blood angels who embrace their monstrous nature in service to humanity's survival? Because we fear what we might become if we stop fighting the curse. You'll become what you already are, monsters. The only question is whether you'll be monsters with purpose or monsters drowning in self-denial. Alucard's voice was gentle now, almost understanding. I've lived both versions. Trust me when I say purpose is better. Across the fortress monastery, alarms began sounding. Not battle warnings, but communication alerts. A message from the Baal system's edge, coded with the highest priority markers. Mephiston's psychic senses flared as he read the transmission's psychic residue. Tyrannid bioships detected entering the system. Hive Fleet Splinter Force, estimated strength significant. They're coming to Baal. Alucard's smile widened with genuine anticipation. Hive mind. Billions of organisms moving with singular purpose. No fear, no hesitation, no weakness, except overwhelming hunger. He drew his pistols, checked their loads, holstered them again. Now that sounds like a worthy opponent. This isn't excitement time, vampire. This is extinction threat time. Same thing from my perspective. Alucard began walking toward the tower's exit, toward where blood angels would be mobilizing, toward where a new war was beginning. Come on, librarian. Let's show these Tyranids why ancient predators don't fear hungry children. And maybe, just maybe, we'll prove that monsters who fight for humanity are more valuable than angels who fight themselves. Lord Mephiston followed, his psychic senses already reaching out to coordinate the chapter's defense. Behind them, Baal's sun finally set, plunging the fortress monastery into darkness lit only by weapon discharges and the crimson glow of 1,000,000 blood angels preparing for war. In the 41st millennium, there is only war. Gods walk among mortals. Ancient machines stir from eons-long sleep. Hive fleets devour worlds, and the Imperium stands on the brink of collapse, maintained by faith, fear, and the refusal to accept defeat. Into this darkness, something impossible had arrived. A vampire from another reality, a monster who served without shame, a weapon that chose its wielder rather than being chosen. And slowly, inexorably, it was changing one of the Imperium's most storied chapters, not through corruption or force, but through the simple act of demonstrating that accepting one's nature doesn't preclude serving noble purposes. Whether this change would save the Blood Angels or doom them remained to be seen. History would judge. But in the moment, as Alucard walked through halls filled with warriors preparing to face extinction, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: contentment. Not peace, never peace, but the satisfaction of a weapon being wielded properly, of a monster serving a cause worth the monstrosity, of an immortal finding purpose in the endless war that defined the 41st millennium. And if that purpose led to his long-sought death at the hands of the hive mind or chaos gods or some other apocalyptic threat, well, that would be a fitting end for the no-life king. Until then, there was work to do, Tyranids to kill, blood angels to protect, a chapter to help evolve, one heretical philosophy at a time. The Emperor protects, they said. Perhaps. But sometimes, the Emperor's protection came in forms the Imperium was too rigid to recognize. Ancient vampires, cursed space marines, and the understanding that monsters and angels weren't opposites. They were just different expressions of the same fundamental truth, that in the darkness of the 41st millennium, survival required embracing what you are and wielding that nature with purpose. Alucard had learned that lesson 5 centuries ago. Now he would teach it to the sons of Sanguinius, one battle at a time, until either they evolved or the universe finally granted him the death he'd been seeking since becoming immortal. Either outcome would be acceptable. Both would be interesting. And in the grim darkness of the far future, interesting was the closest thing to victory an ancient vampire could hope for.